We're going to start in 30 seconds. If everybody would silence your cell phones, please. Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. This is a workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. We are live City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Start off with roll call. Commissioner Don Preston.
Here.
Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Chernowski, absent. He just walked in the door, so I'll enter a here for him. Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner
Tony Bennett.
Tim Bennett.
Here.
I apologize. I apologize.
That's okay, Bill.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Present.
And Mayor Stan Mills is here. We have a full complement of the mayor commissioners. Therefore, we have a quorum and are able to formally conduct business today. I'd also like to identify the staff members that are here to help put on this meeting today. We've got in place of City Secretary Anno here, we have Joe Gottschalk running the machinery and IT equipment. On my left, City Manager Lawrence Christian. On my right, City Solicitor Glenn Mandalis, Assistant City Manager Evan Miller, if you'd raise your hand. Kevin Williams, Public Works Director. Lynn Cohen, Communications Specialist. Directly in the back is Margaret Carson, Executive Secretary. And who else we got? We have Nick Walls with us here. He's a vendor for our planner. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank everybody that's here in person, of course. And as you know, at appropriate times, we will call on you and seek your feedback if you like. All we ask is that you give your name and relationship to the city so we can somewhat identify you. With that, I also want to thank the people that are watching virtually and remind everybody that documents that support our individual agenda items, when they are ready, are embedded into the agendas. Would like to make note that the agendas and an extra support document on parking that was not ready enough in advance of the meeting to be embedded is sitting on a table outside the hall there. With that, we will go to presentation of a proclamation. Vice President Gossett is going to join me up front, as Carol and you three. We're gonna come right up here. And Patrick's gonna get on your far side. You all are gonna stand right here.
Okay.
And we're gonna stand up here a little bit. There we go. Just gotta get set up. Thank you all for being here. And this is a proclamation on Support Your Local Chamber of Commerce Day. I want to read it to you. Whereas the Rehoboth Beach Chamber of Commerce has served as a cornerstone of the business community, providing unwavering support, resources, and opportunities for local businesses to thrive. And whereas founded in 1940, the Rehoboth Beach Chamber of Commerce has been an essential catalyst for business prosperity and economic growth in our community, promoting programs that impact business landscape, offering networking avenues, fostering community and business interactions, and offering crucial resources. And whereas the Rehoboth Beach Chamber of Commerce is guided by their mission to promote business, tourism, and civic responsibility, and serves over 1,300 members. The members include a representative from each of the 6 business categories, including accommodations, attractions, real estate, restaurants, retails, and service. And whereas the Rehoboth Beach Chamber of Commerce has consistently demonstrated its commitment to the betterment of our community, working tirelessly to establish and maintain relationships between businesses and the public. And whereas the Rehoboth Chamber of Commerce has embraced innovation and adaptation, evolving its events and programs to meet the dynamic needs of the changing times while remaining steadfast in its mission. And whereas the Rehoboth Beach Chamber of Commerce's commitment to progress is evident through its role in events such as Restaurant Week, spring and fall sidewalk sales, merchant attics, movies on the beach, and Sea Witch Festival. Now therefore we, Mayor Stan Mills and Board Vice President Patrick Gossett, do hereby proclaim October 18th, 2023 as Support Your Local Chamber of Commerce Day. October 18th, 2023, proclaim this 10th day of October 2023. And I know we left out Dewey Beach as your official name, so I apologize. But there we go. So now we're our photo op. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You want to introduce everybody here? Well, we know who you are. Carol Everhart, Executive Director.
Okay. This is Kelly Stevenson. She's with Fulton Bank. She's one of our newest board members. And Dale Loomis, of course, Crosswinds and other businesses. And Dale is one of our tenured.
I'm one of the older people.
Oh, that's obvious.
I was happy that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our next item of business following along our agenda is correspondence, and no correspondence has been identified. With that, we'll go to the city manager's report. Lawrence?
Thank you, Mayor. Embedded into the agenda is the Finance Department budget report from April to July 2023. Our Finance Director, Bert Dukes, has done a great job identifying budget revenue and expenditures throughout the year so far. And on that same vein, I'd like to announce that the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award, the City of Rehoboth Beach, has received the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for its fiscal year 2024 budget from the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA. This is the 3rd consecutive year that Rehoboth's budget document has been recognized for meeting national guidelines. To earn GFOA recognition, budget documents must serve effectively as a policy document, financial plan, operations guide, and communications device. An agency must be rated as proficient in all 4 categories and meet the 14 mandatory criteria within each one of those categories. Meeting these national guidelines definitely requires a team effort, which is led by our Finance Director, Bert Dukes, and our very own Assistant City Manager, Evan Miller. Great job for both of those individuals and that whole team. Our work continues on Laurel and Scarborough Avenue. Installation of the new water main in the 3rd block of Laurel Avenue has been completed. Service line installations are expected to begin next week. Concrete curb and sidewalk work is ongoing on Scarborough Avenue. And once the water line work is completed on Laurel, both roads will be resurfaced. The city continues to encourage homeowners on those streets to undertake any needed utility or sidewalk work before the roads are resurfaced. To date, 18 homeowners have inquired about sewer lateral replacement and or sidewalk curb work. And finally, big announcement for the new Planning and Community Development Director, who will join the team on October 23rd. We are truly excited to announce that Mary Ellen Gray will assume her new role as the City of Rehoboth Beach first Director of Planning and Community Development on October 23rd. Mary Ellen will bring with her 25 years of experience working in public planning environment. Most recently, Mary Ellen comes to us as the Director of Planning, Inspections, and Community Development from Dover. Director Gray is a member of the American Institute for Certified Planners, has also worked in planning for the City of Newark, Kent County Levy Court, as well as Indiana and the City of Salisbury. And pending any questions, Mayor, Commissioners, that's all I have.
Thank you. Would you mind explaining what Mary Ellen's role is in the layman's terms? I know it says community development, but I envision her as top person in the building and licensing department.
Mayor, that's a great question, and that's exactly what Mary Ellen will bring to the table. She brings years, decades of experience with us. Her role right now will assume as the Director of Planning and Community Development, taking over all responsibilities and authority as a director within the building and licensing. As that department takes over a little more higher level responsibility, she has a host of planning and community development background. She is well-versed in inspections, code enforcement. Again, she is an AICP certified planner. So will be a great team for that department as it continues to build itself out and really find its way into the future.
Thank you. Any questions among the commissioners? Thank you, Lawrence.
Sorry, not a
sorry,
question, but just a request. Thank you for the April to July budget comment updates. And I noticed in there the report on parking permit sales and parking fines. Is it possible at the next workshop to get a end-of-season report about the parking for the season, revenues, experiences, what have you?
We have that on the agenda, or tentative agenda for the 20th, the regular
Great,
meeting.
thank you very much.
Along with, what other departments we're going to have on there? We're going to have police, parking, public works, okay, and beach patrol.
Communications, yeah.
Communications will also be there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Lawrence. With that, we'll move on to City Solicitor's report.
Mary, the only thing I wanted to follow up on Lawrence's is that Mary Ellen Gray, she is fabulous. I've worked with her for a long time and have a case with her right now in the city of Dover, and she is a really good pickup for the city, so congrats on that. But I don't have anything other than that, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we're going to move on to old business. I'd like to poll the audience. The next bit of business is discussion on possible amendments to Section 270-35D relating to minimum number of parking spaces required for certain uses. You might recall going back in time, this commission charged the Planning Commission with seeking out changes and different recommendations to the parking requirements. They brought them forward. These commissioners rejected some and they adopted others, where they came away, though, with a void in certain areas. So City Manager Lawrence Christian ended up tasking Wallace Montgomery with doing a further search into parking requirements, and they've made one presentation to us. This is a follow-up presentation. And what I want to do is, does anybody, members of the public, not have the support document for this that we put out there? It's a single, double, anybody need it? Everybody, okay, we'll move on then. Lawrence, I'll hand it over to you, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We got Nick Walls here, and we're going to go ahead and start moving forward in earnest. Okay. Nick?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, everyone on the commission. So last time when we were here, we discussed, a wide range of uses and where they fit within the town's existing parking ratio requirements. We found that there were a bunch of uses that were mentioned in the zoning code that didn't have an explicit ratio set, so we tried to propose something that we felt was reasonable. And then there were a couple questions about, and I think Commissioner Sharp, you in particular, had asked, are there any locations that use the capacity of the building, of the intended use, to establish parking standards? And I said, gosh, yeah, I know there are, but let me go back and take a look and see and find some real examples for you before I speak out of turn.
Sure.
And essentially what I tried to do was focus on, well, starting with Delaware, and then looking at some of the more, I don't want to say random, but the less common uses that we found gaps in within the city of Rehoboth. So the public assembly, the tavern, the convention center, stadiums, theaters, things of that nature that aren't super common, that we wanted to get another sort of sense of what other people are doing. How are other people addressing this? and I found a wide variety, essentially. So what I did here was just put some highlights, and you can see that in Millsboro, Milton, Georgetown, Dagsboro, Selbyville, and Dewey Beach, all of those localities use a parking requirement that is built upon the capacity of the structure itself, of the intended use. So sometimes it's referred to as, one space for every 5 seats. Sometimes like in Milton, those seats correspond to a certain amount of area. So 20 square feet is roughly what they use for seating. I'm sorry, for every 20 square foot used for seating, they will establish 1 space. So they find that basically a 2x2 seating area is a pretty maximum amount that you can cram in. So that's what they're trying to do here, is establish an area with a seat. And so you can see there are a number of different use classes, a number of different parking requirements here that all sort of tangentially come back to the issue of how many people are you putting in that building, at what density, and underlying all of that, if we flip basically to the second page, is how are you calculating the occupant load, the backside, I'm sorry, of that handout. And so this really is a building code, fire code question that can get very detailed. But I found this very short passage here that I thought sort of summed it up nicely, at least at a high level. And it didn't confuse me, so I thought that was good. Essentially, you take all of the different pieces of your building and you carve it up into the intended uses. So a room like this would have essentially 2 uses. It would have seating areas and would have egress and ingress and traffic flow, if you will, pedestrian flow. So they will identify a maximum amount of people that you can seat within those seating areas, and then give you a little bit extra buffer, and that's your occupant loading for this room. Now, if we had, say, a kitchen or a bathroom stalls in portions of this, obviously those would be calculated differently. But when you add all of the spaces together and all of the intended densities of use, that's when you get the ultimate occupant loading of a building. And now something to be clear on here is that occupant loads are closely related to fire codes. And ultimately, the goal is to make sure that we're not putting more people into a building than we can safely get out within a certain amount of time. The fire codes are very detailed in that regard and get into a lot of, detail in how you calculate time and loading and all of that. So I don't want to go into that level here, but suffice to say that in answer to your question, yes, a lot of municipalities across the country use occupant loading, use fire loading to drive the parking space requirements of a wide range of uses. Hopefully that answered your question.
It does,
Okay, great.
but that's certainly not our approach.
Well, that's one approach that we can
One
take.
approach.
And what I did find in looking at it, in looking at these and other municipalities with a different question in mind, which is how consistent are these other municipalities in the ratios and approach that they use? The answer is they are not. There is no consistency between and I'm going to use Millsboro as an example, but it could be any town. They might use 1 space per 5 seats for public assembly and funeral homes here, and then use one space for 3,000 square feet for a commercial shopping center. So they have, all these different municipalities mix and match for the most part to come up with something that they like. I will say that the newer parking standards that you see reflected in like Knoxville, Tennessee, and Los Angeles there, I see that they use a little bit more of a minimum and a maximum range. That's definitely going with the trend in professional planning towards creating maximum caps on the amount of parking that is required. Again, the intent there being to reduce the amount of unnecessary surface parking that have sprung up across the country associated with things like shopping malls and you know the type. So the short answer is we can choose from any of the approaches that you all like to mix and match and find the right answer for Rehoboth. Mayor, is there any questions I can answer?
Nick, if we look at Dewey Beach, use class convention center, one space for 200 square feet or one space for every 4 fixed seats. In my mind, we're missing something there. Like comma, whichever is greater.
Yes, and that was for space. You're right. Whichever is greater is often appended at the very end of all of these. Except for the ones that give you a range, that is.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of flexibility that we have to shape the parking standards that we have proposed previously. So I don't know if this helps to narrow things down. I think if anything, it broadens the question.
It does for me.
Right?
Well, I think
thank
one of the things I think we need to do is pull out that support document from last time and integrate it with this so that we can have a better look. Now, you know, we really didn't have a lot of time to study this, so are you able to give a brief summary of your links there, what is the essence of these links?
Oh, the links, yes. So those I provided for your edification. There were a couple things that I came across in this research that I thought, wow, I would be remiss if I didn't pass this along. So one of the first things that I came across was a parking benefit district. And as a concept, it's sort of like a tax improvement zone or a transportation improvement, a select district where you have a tax incentive or a revenue incentive to somehow support local infrastructure needs. And essentially what the parking benefit district does is it takes a portion of the revenue generated by surface parking and reinvests it into things that will help ameliorate the parking crunch that a lot of cities are facing. Things like providing remote valet parking services. Believe it or not, some places have had great success providing on-demand valet from remote surface lots into the town center. Similar with other types of remote parking shuttle type transportation. It can provide funding for that. It can provide funding for whatever might be necessary for your town to do to improve parking. So I wanted to bring this to your attention as something that you might see in the future from the Rossi Group as well, as part of their parking recommendations. The second link there is parking management and design. This I was fascinated about because of one simple diagram that showed you how you can take an existing square parking lot that has stalls around the outside and the inside, and if you use angled parking, you can increase the total parking by 30%. And it's little tweaks like that that will enable Rehoboth Beach to hopefully overcome its current crunch in parking. And maybe besides looking at our ratios and requirements, there's opportunity to engage with property owners in the area to look at opportunities to revise surface parking to increase and maximize the total spaces. That could be a good private-public partnership type program that I could foresee. And the third link there is calculating occupant load. That one gets into the nitty-gritty details from the National Fire Protection Agency as to how they really do get into the details of calculating occupant load. So hopefully those three of you just provided some additional information and knowledge as you consider these different questions.
The one on parking management and design, as you were just describing, it sounded like our east parking lot right outside this building.
Yes.
And so there would be an opportunity, did you say 30% increase?
In the example that they
essence?
gave, yeah, don't quote me on the numbers. I
Right.
make numbers up
Right.
sometimes. But yes, it was a substantial increase over what was originally there. Yeah. It was pretty impressive. So
So city manager, just to link back to our new director who's coming, would that be something that just out over time she'd be looking at things like that? Or how do we connect these dots here of maybe additional ways to maximize what we already have?
I really think, Commissioner, that would be in her wheelhouse as she moves
would.
forward, because she's going to have the transportation traffic parking study, a result sometime late this year, early next year.
Okay.
I mean, that will be all food kind of comes into her brain housing group as she kind of develops her better understanding of Rehoboth.
Great,
So,
thank you. Thank you very much.
no, absolutely.
Mr. Gossett, did you?
Yeah, just a question with regards, some examples here talk about design capacity and then design or maximum design load. How is that defined in essence, or whose responsibility is it to define those quantifiers?
So that would be, and I'm sorry, let me.
The bottom,
let me
like Knoxville and Los Angeles, they're,
So it is up in those jurisdictions like Knoxville where they have a minimum and a maximum. It's up to the property owner to determine where he or she wants to fit in that range. A lot of times the property owners have, I won't say better knowledge, but more detailed knowledge of what they anticipate their loading to be. They know based on their corporate history how to anticipate a Friday night, you know, how to better guess than a lot of the ratios that you'll find in government policy will. And so they will use their knowledge to say, all right, if my minimum is 100 and my max is 300, but I really know I need 150. That's all they're going to be, that's all they are going to want to build to maximize or minimize their costs and maximize their returns. And as a town, as a municipality, we would be interested in making sure that it's right-sized for them. So again, leaning towards the property owner's knowledge of their business.
and then because the municipality here does not set the occupancy load of fire marshal, that's done by the state's fire marshal. So this come down the line, deeper questions, but if those two numbers are in conflict or greatly separate, how does that resolve? Or is there a formula for that, or whose responsibility is to make those determinations?
Just to make sure I might understand, so if there's a discrepancy between the fire marshal's estimate and
The developer's estimate, if you will.
well, as long as the developer's estimate fits within these mins and maxes, and the design capacity is what it is, that's going to be stated by the fire marshal.
Okay.
I don't think I answered your question well there. The
the
fire
fire-
marshal will set the design capacity.
And then then the minimum maximums are based from that?
Correct.
So that's where it
yes.
starts with the fire marshal?
Yes, I'm sorry. I made that confusing as possible.
No, that's fine, thank you. But
Yep.
again, we as a municipality do not set those load levels, that's done by the state.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
No, thank you.
Anybody else? Is there any members of the public like to speak on this parking issue? Francis? Joe, do you know if this microphone's on? All right.
Walls, W-A-L-L-S.
I'm sorry, I was thinking they said Wallace.
Francis, state your name and relationship to the city, please.
Hi, Frances Kelleher, resident. Mr. Walls, I just wanted to ask you, did you happen to look up or figure out what in Dagsboro, did they have a parking kind of requirement for the Clayton Theater there? Which is like a kind of a retro movie theater. They have a lot of,
I didn't, I'm sorry, I didn't look
no.
in specific,
I
at
just wondered.
specific use cases, more so just the actual parking charts in the zoning codes.
okay. I was just wondering, since they had a place of worship, did they have a figure for their Clayton Theater?
Yeah, that was just the one use within Dagsboro's zoning code that had the ratio based on a capacity value.
Okay. So another question I had for you, since you were saying, these are examples, and the one in Delaware for place of worship is Dagsboro. Does that mean or not mean that that was the only small town in Delaware that had a parking requirement for a place of worship?
No, by no means. Most everywhere has a requirement for parking for places of worship. It was essentially a random selection that I chose when I was going basically down the list of all of the codes in Delaware.
Okay. I was going to say that like Dagsboro is basically a crossroads, and it's really almost like a drive-through town. You hang a left, you go to the Clayton Theater.
Okay.
And again, there's kind of like, it's just a small crossroad with not really like, it's not like our city that has like a lot of developed streets and grids, you
Yeah.
know, like that. So I noted that it only seemed there was one church in Dagsboro, and it's right on their main drag, which is really, and I can't think of the route number now, but it's really the main route street, which is like a kind of a main route that goes right through. And I was thinking maybe they did that because of the church being right there on the main drag where there really isn't any parking. It's kind of like a busy route number.
Thoroughfare. But
Yeah, and I can't think of
yeah.
the route number.
Sure.
But on the side, when you make a left turn to where the Clayton Theater is, then, then of course, and again, I think there is a little tiny parking lot next to the Clayton Theater, but I know I had to park on the street, but you just kind of keep going and try to find street parking. So did you happen to know whether the city of Wilmington had or a larger city like even Newark, Delaware, had anything about the places of worship?
I don't recall offhand.
Okay.
I did a look through almost every code that I had readily available, just to find quick examples here and there. It was not a scientific examination by any means.
So I would just like to point out that in the city of Wilmington, which is a lot of grids and a lot of street parking, there's dozens and dozens of churches. It's the old days where people walk to their local churches, so there's like steeples everywhere. And most of those churches, well, some of the churches have parking lots adjacent. A lot of them do not. And I think our city, I just want to point out that I feel our city has ample parking along the streets. which would not necessitate, I can't even say it, require, like, or even think of putting one space for 5 seats
Right.
for our local churches.
Yeah.
And 3 of our local churches are in the residential
Mm-hmm.
district, and only one of our local churches is really, I call it like right kind of in the main,
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore Avenue. And again, there's so much street parking
Mm-hmm.
that it seems to me like a number of spaces of parking per seats wouldn't really be necessary.
I agree with you.
Oh,
These are provided as examples of how others do it, and it's all reflective of their local needs and
their need,
experiences.
right. That's what I was
Because,
thinking. It was
you know,
based on need.
Exactly as you said with like Wilmington, they don't need to have a lot of parking because people are walking. Whereas in somewhere like a Dagsboro, where you don't have a lot of density around the church, more people are driving.
Yes.
So you need
yeah.
more parking.
And it's on a place where there is almost no street parking.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Anybody else, members of the public? If not, we'll come back to the table here. Commissioners would need some guidance on what the next steps are. It seems to me that we need to pull the previous support document and take a look and identify which of the parking categories needs to be updated and agree to that, and then start looking at the formulas that we need to apply to set restrictions on those. You want to give us any guidance on the
would
next steps?
I would still really urge you to perhaps delay much more action until the Rossi Group's recommendations are in.
Okay.
While my effort in looking at this is not duplicative or does not necessarily overlap with what the Rossi Group is doing, I also feel that there's enough synchronicity there that we don't want to get out of step with one another.
Okay, so if we adhere to that guidance, then if you all agree, there'll be a hiatus on this until such time as we receive the Rossi transportation and parking study. Lawrence, can you give us an idea of how that's going and what the time frame might be?
Thank you, Mayor. Last coordination we had with Lex was, I believe, Evan, was it last week, 2 weeks ago? I think it's going along well. They will be presenting at the next workshop meeting preliminary recommendations. We put that one on the next workshop agenda as well for discussion. What that will do is that will provide preliminary recommendations to the Board of Commissioners well ahead of the budget development cycle just for discussion and an early understanding. So again, I think that's well timed that Nick's bringing this up so we can kind of synchronize both of those elements.
Just as a quick note, something I found very interesting was that one of the more consistent recommendations that I found in all of the parking research was to look at the charge rate that your on-street parking is, because you want to find a level where it's 85% full all the time and about 15% unoccupied. So that there is capacity. And what they found is that a lot of times the rate that you charge per car, per hour of parking can directly influence the availability of on-street parking, something I wasn't very familiar with. So I would expect the Rossi Group's recommendations to include reviewing the rates of on-street parking to encourage turnover. So.
All right.
Anyway.
All righty. So we've got a path forward, which is going to be delayed a little bit till we receive that report from Rossi. And thank you for this. You've done 2 support documents and research. We appreciate you coming here in person and bringing that forward. Thank you, Nick. And so you don't need to stay up there unless you're going to be on a later agenda item. Our next item of business is presentation by Building and Licensing Department on conversion of non-habitable basements into finished space. This is, we've been waiting a long time for this. If you recall, we started out with basements and minimum basement heights and different dimensions that Corey brought forward, and we had delayed on approaching this subject. So I think this is really an introductory subject, isn't it? It is. And so to give us some ideas of where we're headed with this. Lawrence?
Yeah. Joe, can we transition over for Corey to have control? Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioners. I'm going to turn this right over to Corey. I think he's done another great job of taking a very complex subject and trying to break it down to some really digestible information bites for us. So without further ado, Corey.
All right, thank you, and good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, and Rehoboth. This is going to be a little bit of a change of pace from the previous presentations on the 6-foot 6-inch basements. In the previous presentations, the city was asked what the scope of the problem was. If this is a non-issue, or if it is an issue, how big of an issue is it? And so this presentation this morning is going to detail some of the findings that were collected after a search, which I'll go into in these next few slides. So the key questions for today is, what is the magnitude of the issue? What's the scope? How many 6-foot 6-inch basements are being built in Rehoboth or have been built? How many of these homes are being rented? What do these non-habitable basements look like? And what's the current enforcement procedure for these spaces?
Would you mind just starting off with, what is the significance of the 6-foot 6-inch dimension?
Yes. This was started initially because of a discrepancy with Rehoboth Beach's zoning codes and the adopted building codes that we use. Rehoboth Beach uses the 2018 International Code Council cycle, which states, as far as the residential codes go, that all habitable spaces, which are areas in a house that's used for living, eating, sleeping, or cooking, have a minimum ceiling height of 7 feet. The 6-foot 6-inch basement, from going back in time, was written into code in Rehoboth to try to help give residents some storage space, but it was never intended for them to be used as living spaces down there or to put bedrooms down there in these spaces. Over time, it was found that some of these houses were being built without emergency escape and rescue openings, which is very dangerous. Some of them didn't have smoke and carbon monoxide detectors present, even though these spaces were the ones that housed most of the mechanical equipment. And so this problem was brought to light by BNL in an attempt to address these issues and bring in Rehoboth Beach's zoning codes into compliance with the adopted building codes that Rehoboth Beach uses. And today is going to go into a little bit about what the current numbers are for the city as far as what we could find from the search that we did do. So the approach that we had for this investigation was really in the past 5 years. We looked at from January 2018 to June of 2023. Rehoboth Beach switched to a Munis system, which is kind of a data storage, data collection space, in May of 2019. Prior to that, the Rehoboth Beach was using a system called iWork. And what we looked at was all the information off of those systems, what were all of the properties that were built new construction for residential purposes, and then each one of those is attached a certificate of occupancy. And on that certificate of occupancy, there's a special stipulation and condition on it that state basements shall not be used as habitable space. And that's going back all through these 5 years that the sample that was drawn from. There was a brief and limited open source search. Open source is something that's just limited, that's open to the general public. So these were things that we could find with public search engines, Google and other ones on different websites for listings primarily, either for rent or for sale. And we correlated all of those with the addresses of the houses that were built in Rehoboth over the last 5 years for new construction. One of the certificates of occupancy is just an example. It looks like this. You can see it has the use classification, the occupancy group, the type of construction, fire district. We do not include a design occupant load in residential here, but what we do include is the special stipulation and conditions, which is that the basement shall not be used as habitable space, and that's what we're looking for here. And so all of these numbers were pulled based off of this stipulation on a certificate of occupancy.
And Corey, you can confirm that since your tenure and before that, all of the 6'6" basements had this statement on there: basement should not be used as habitable space.
That's correct. Now, again, this is only going back through January of 2018. So the raw numbers, the totals that we're looking at, there were 122 houses built during that time, new constructions. Out of that 122, 78 of them had a 6'6" basement. The unlawful basements that were found, again, this was after a very brief online search, were 6. 2 of those properties were for rent, 4 of those properties were for sale. That number 6 only came for the active listings that we were able to find after a brief online search that actually listed the addresses for the properties. All of those property locations, addresses, and any names have been redacted for this presentation. However, it is Building and Licensing's determination that this is, the actual number is much higher than this. This is simply what we were able to find after a very brief search online. Out of that, 7 of the most recent 25 homes built are rentals between 2022 and 2023.
Of those 4 properties for sale, 2 properties for rent, 4 properties for sale, the 4 properties for sale, do you know if they advertised that they were rentals at the same time, that they're for sale, but they have a rental income of X dollars so that we can prove that they were renting them out?
Not from the listings that we took. That would, we can certainly follow up. Thankfully, we have a second code enforcement officer now, and I believe this is going to take a consistent research and looking into from a code enforcement perspective to make sure that when we go down the approach of enforcing anything that these spaces are being used unlawfully, that would be something that would be ongoing.
All right, thank you, Corey.
I put down the last number as 7 of the most recent 25 homes built are rentals. That's 28%. Prior to those most recent 25 homes, only 3 homes were used as rentals. So what this shows is that the further you go back in time, the majority of those homes are not being used as rentals that the city currently has on record. Again, that's the caveat for all these statements. But as time has gone on, the number or the proportion of new homes being built that are being used as rentals has accelerated.
Corey, can we clarify one thing, please? Those homes don't have a business license. I don't think we can definitively say that they're not being used for rental, but they do not possess a business license. Those are 2 distinctions that are very clear.
That's correct. Out of those, the most recent 25 homes, 7 of them are being used as rentals. They have a business license that's attached in Munis that the city pulls from its main source of information. So again, this isn't including houses that may be being used for rentals right now that the city doesn't know about.
I just want to be very factual on this one. You know, we're throwing things around there, and I want to be very clear. They have a business license, so we can definitely say they're a rental property.
Could we go back to the previous point? It says 2 properties for rent, 4 properties for sale, and it says they're unlawful. What in your search made you determine that they were unlawful?
Thank you for the question. That's actually addressed in a later slide.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, I'll pick up on that
Sure thing.
as we move along.
Thank you.
That's a good catch, though, because that's a very particular word that I used, and that comes from certain code. So just to give everyone a visual, out of all 122 houses in the last 5 years, 64% of them have the 6-foot 6-inch basements. And then the others are 36%. All others are all other homes that either have habitable basements, which are 7-foot ceilings or more, crawl spaces, or slab-on grades. And Rehoboth has fairly consistently for the last 5 years averaged 24 to 25 houses a year. And based off of the trends, it seems as though we're going to continue that for this year as well. So getting into some of these examples, this first one, I'm just going to point out here of the highlighted sections. And some of these are for sale, as mentioned, some of them are for rent. And they show photos of these basement spaces, so you can kind of get a sense of what they look like now, what they're being used for, and what the intent was when the 6-foot 6-inch code was written. And we can kind of see a difference there. This first one, the 3,600 square foot home has a full basement with windows for natural light and an egress window for a bedroom. Now that would be okay if the basement was built for 7 foot or higher. But when we allowed the zoning code to state 6-foot 6-inch basements, we inadvertently triggered to allow people to have the incorrect conclusion that they could put sleeping rooms down there. Even though it is technically allowed, you can have an egress window in a basement, and it can be in a bedroom, and that's all you'll need. You have to have a 7-foot minimum ceiling height for a bedroom. 6'8" minimum ceiling height for a basement that does not contain habitable space. And so there are several issues that are at play here, not just if it can be defined as a basement or not. And this is what is giving, I believe, some of the contractors or possible future owners the idea that they can purchase or rent these properties and then use them for bedrooms. They're right in the listing. And because Rehoboth calls them a basement, we allow them to finish them, and it looks like it's finished space. It looks like it's the first story of the house. This second example.
I have a quick question, Corey. So is that at the top? I know you said we're just dealing with the basement, but just, is that 4,400, you think they've calculated that based upon the basement? Because we don't allow houses that big, right?
No, this is talking about square footage or floor area ratio, otherwise known as gross floor area. The houses are restricted to a proportion, a percentage, usually 60% if it's without a pool or 50% if it has a pool, and then there's some play if the lot's a little bit bigger. And what you'll see in these is that these homes are being either sold or used for rent, showing that these are usable spaces. It's usable square footage. I don't want to get off topic here, but just piggybacking on the parking thing, that parking goes into floor area, and I would just, if we could just make sure that floor area is kind of a flexible concept, and it has a lot of different, it can impact a lot of things as far as if you want to make any decisions about the building at a later date. In this case, we're seeing that the house, the floor area is being used and attached to the listing as usable space.
Corey, kind of continue for just a second for clarification in my mind. But there's also the 1,000-foot that is not calculated if it's basement space, correct? So that
Correct.
This 4412 square footage, it could be a 3,500 square foot home above ground, and then the 1,000-foot below?
That's if we were to take a 5,000 square foot lot.
Correct.
And because of the ordinance that you did pass recently that wiped away the 8-foot minimum, people can now take advantage of the 1,000 square foot credit. If you had a 5,000 square foot lot without a pool, and you didn't take advantage of that, you could build 3,000 square feet. That's 60%. If you wanted to take advantage of the 1,000 square foot credit for for a full basement between 7 and 8 feet ceiling heights, you would get 1,000 square feet down there, and then you're reduced to 50% up top. So you have 2,500 up top and 1,000 down below. That gives you a net of 3,500. So you net 500 square feet more, but the trade-off is that you'll lose space above ground. So your net total of your house you can put on a listing would be 3,500 square feet.
But the intent of that was to reduce bulk, correct, or expose bulk, if you will?
That's correct. And that would reduce the size, the footprint of the house above grade, I presume giving a bit more space for natural area.
Thank you.
But Corey, is it correct that the 6'6" basements, none of that square footage is counted?
That's correct.
As gross floor area?
And that's why I believe we saw 66% of the last 122 houses built in Rehoboth have the 6'6" basement. It's free space. This next example, I'll be kind of brief with these. These are really just to show examples of what we did find in the limited time that we had the research. This has a full basement with entertainment, game, and TV room. So this is your second living room down here. This one here, this house has an entirely separate living area and game center awaits in the full finished basement. This space is enhanced with recessed lighting, huge pool tables, large flat screen TV, multiple sitting areas, and even a skee ball machine. What's not included is the very next sentence. It says upstairs you'll find the remaining 4-bedroom suites, and this house is listed as 5-bedroom. So that's kind of an indirect indicator that that space could be used as a bedroom as well. The next one here, wait, there's much more, mostly finished basement. Here we are again with the square footage down there, 1,300 square foot, and that's roughly an average of what I see on houses. It's usually between 1,200 and 1,300 square feet, 6'6" basements. Bonus room that takes advantage of the full 6'6" ceiling, no hanging ductwork, wires, pipes, or lights. And the features include Core-Tech flooring, accent wall, recessed lighting, pre-wired for TV, cable in multiple locations, electric fireplace, heat producing or ambience, and custom wet bar and powder room. This one is one that I really wanted to point out because of what it states, and this is the one that I'm most worried about, listings or homes that are being used for this. It says the lower level of the home has a large bedroom/play area with 4 twin beds. This is the perfect sleeping accommodation for kids because the ceiling height is low. And that's the last thing that we want. And so, yes, we can't say for certain. I haven't done the investigation onto how many of these actually have the emergency escape and rescue openings. I just know for a fact that not all of them do. There are some that don't. And so what we want to do is to make these spaces either being used for storage, utility, or mechanical purposes, or have them built so that they can be used safely for these purposes. And the last example, I wanted to show what it looks like with the plan under plan review. So it's not just the certificate of occupancy that has the special stipulation. That's the back end of the building. At the front end, during plan review, these blueprints, the floor plans that show the foundations or show these storage areas, have written by Rehoboth staff that the basements shall not be used for habitable space, and the code sections listed out. And right next to this one, you can see this house was brought in with the proposal to have storage spaces down there. And right next to it is the reality of what happens. Your lower level offers a recreational room with ping pong and shuffleboard, a full bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. So it shows the dichotomy of what is received and what is built, and then what the uses are being used for. Some of these common themes that all of these listings shown was that they had a full basement, a finished basement, bedrooms, and living and recreational space, all of which could be tied back to what we would call habitable space, any areas in in a building used for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking. The existing enforcement procedure, frankly put, it's not enough, and it's vague. And there's not a whole lot of recourse that is specific that code enforcement or the building and licensing could target right now if we wanted to do anything about this. What we have is Chapter 126, and a lot of that is for the police officers on what to do when it's civil rather than criminal. We can issue a notice of violation. This notice of violation comes with corrective actions and timeframes for those corrective actions. And then if that's not performed in the time period given, we can issue citations and fines. But again, Chapter 126, what those are is basically you pay a $25 assessment fee. And you pay that, or you go to the alderman court and you plead your case there as to why you think you should be able to use the space, or that it's not being used for this purpose. And that's what we have right now with our Rehoboth Code. The building code, and Commissioner Preston, to your question, I use the word unlawful because that's what comes from the building code. 2018 IRC Section R113.3, it states that these occupying non-habitable basements is recognized as an unlawful act, and a notice of violation shall be given. And so the actual building code that we've adopted says if the notice of violation is not complied with in the time prescribed by such notice, the building official is authorized to request the legal counsel of the jurisdiction to institute the appropriate proceeding at law or in equity to restrain, correct, or abate such violation, or to require the removal or termination of the unlawful occupancy of the building or structure in violation of the provisions of this code or the order or direction made pursuant thereto. That's kind of a way of saying it's up to the jurisdiction and their legal counsel as to what the jurisdiction wants to do if unlawful occupancy is found. And that's the end of the presentation. That's what we have to work with currently. But I hope this gives you kind of a scope of what the spaces look like and what they're being used for.
Corey, on the same slide where Commissioner Preston, I think it's the third or fourth slide where it has basement totals of the past 5 years.
Yes.
That, where he picked up on the word unlawful basements, I think I'm confused that if 2 of the properties are for rent, how did they get a rental license with an unlawful basement?
Those, we allow under the resolution that was adopted several months ago, we allow these spaces to be built with a vertical height from floor to bottom of first floor floor joists of 6 feet 6 inches or less, to exist and to be finished. So if they go in and they don't see anything as far as bedrooms go, or trying to define living space it can get complicated as what is used for living space, what's not being used. But under the resolution right now, there's nothing that would be deemed unlawful about it, except now that the listings specifically state that these spaces are being used as living spaces or have bedrooms in them. Because now we have it on paper, or we have a documentation that's stating that their use is not storage, but actually their use is for living space or sleeping space.
Well, when we issue that rental license, I assume a rental is already furnished.
Usually, yes.
When people
Yes.
are looking to rent a property, I would think they want to see the furniture that's going to be in the property. I'm just confused as to how we're not catching these things. Do we not do a visual inspection of a rental license?
We do one time when they first get a rental license.
Okay, so bottom line is, all you had to do is leave that space unfurnished.
Yes, you just bring a bunch of boxes down there, because the rental license is usually sought extremely shortly after they get the certificate of occupancy. There's boxes being moved into the house, furniture being moved in. But if the basement isn't set up to look like how it looks in the pictures, there's nothing they can cite.
I fully believe that that's happened quite a bit. You go in, you build a house, you buy a house, the basement's unfinished, and it may be even drywalled. And then you get all your inspections, you get your rental license, and then a period of time later, you convert that basement or start putting furniture in if it's already drywall, and then you violated the code under our noses. We don't know.
Well, and I guess where I'm confused is if we have samples in this presentation where we know it, why don't we know it? Why don't we know it across the board? I'm looking at what our problem is, and if you can uncover it with these samples, why can't we uncover it across the board? Is it a human resource problem? Or, I'm trying to get to the core of why isn't this more easily solved with the rental license, the business license, in my opinion, should be at risk. So I'm not understanding.
If you recall back a couple of months, we talked about the code and what changes to the code, and there was some confusion, some angst about changing the code. So because what I caught from that was the commissioner's like, well, what's the scope of the problem? And I think this gets a step there about
Yes.
what the scope of the problem is, how much of it is. We still don't have a full scope of the problem because this research that was done, you saw those 6 properties right there. That was from open source, like Google, Redfin, whatever, Zillow, from an intern. Diamond did the research before she departed.
Sure.
But a lot of the rental software, you don't know the address of the house until after you book the house. So you don't know if it's a rental. So we can't go in proprietary software and start searching around and figure out who has a rental license and who doesn't based off of all the rentals across within the city, because we don't have that software.
Can't we just ask the realtors?
I'm going to leave that one to you, Glenn.
Well, you can ask the realtors, but the real issue here is how far you want to go with enforcement. Corey has just shown examples that are in violation of the code, and you can take enforcement actions against them to revoke the license. The deal with revoking the license is city manager has to give notice, then the owner has 10 days to correct the defect. If they correct the defect, this code says you don't revoke the license. So, it's a perpetual every 10 days. So this is a code change that you can make. Another option is, you go to the alderman or you go to some other court of equity, court of chancery, seeking a declaratory action you'd seek an order from the court saying that this is a violation of the code, and you'd ask the court to enjoin the owner from continuing the use as the bottom space as habitable space. So there's options, but they all cost money, take time, and so there are ways to go about it. Going in, once you see these examples that Corey has given, that's probably probable cause, but you have to go to a judge first and say, Judge, may I have a warrant to go inspect this house? You can't just go knock on the door. You can go knock on the door, and if they let you in, then that's fine. But if an owner says you can't come in, you have to get a warrant from a judge to be able to actually go in and inspect the basement. So, there's a lot of process that you need to go through, but there are options.
City manager, could you clarify, did you just say that we don't have the software?
Yes, because rental agencies, it's not like you would for a real estate. They'll actually share listings in the sale market. Rentals usually don't share any listings. It's proprietary. So
it's not that we don't have the software, it's that the software will never be available to us.
That's one of the things I think I had one of the conversations. We don't know what's out there in total. We don't know if we can become part of that one, because the same industry that's blossoming right now is also working to try and help itself. And so I think it's time for us to explore some of those options. I spoke with Commissioner Gossett several weeks ago, and even looking at some of these things. And I think now that we understand the totality of the problem, or at least in a way that we possibly can now, I think now is the next step till we start looking at some of these companies that may help us even see ourselves further, because this is the problem that we're only seeing the iceberg, the 10% above the water, that 90% still hanging out below the water. Or that 90% is very, very small. We don't know is what we don't know.
Have we ever enforced any of these?
I think we,
To my knowledge, we have not. There was a time period when Steve Kordick was the assistant building inspector, and I tried to follow that lead until the resolution took effect, and we tried to minimize the situation on the front end in plan review by limiting the type or the amount of finish in these spaces.
Right.
We did enforce.
Because I'm just wondering what the fine would be if we had, because if it's, you mentioned $25, that was just for filing, right? Or is that what the fine would be?
That was in Chapter 126, because
The civil offense?
that's the civil offense for the assessment fee. That's the only fee that's actually given in Chapter 126. That has a dollar figure attached to it.
Okay.
City solicitor.
We did enforce one time, there was
There
one
was
instance.
one instance,
It was
it
an
was-
attic, not a basement, it was an attic that had been converted. And
My recollection is the fine was fairly significant.
it was, I'll look that up, it was on the order of thousands of dollars, and I think it was north of $20,000. That was,
But that wasn't that a very egregious case?
it was a very egregious case.
Very egregious case.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at the plain vanilla, you stay under the radar, you know, your property is unlawful, but we don't really do much on the front end to prevent it. I'm more looking at the fact that we only inspect a rental with a basement that's perfectly capable of being used as part of the rental space one time and one time only.
Right, I mean, so business licenses issue annually, rental licenses issue annually. So, I mean, if you had the manpower, you would inspect every year before issuing that next license and not issue the license if you found this occurrence. But people could go through the process of every year pulling those beds up out of there, do the inspection, put the beds back. I mean, the case that we're talking about with the attic, I'll just take a moment to tell you, it was an interesting case because we had gotten a tip that there was a lot of activity going on in the home, and Sharon Lynn, who was the city manager at the time, wanted to inspect. The property manager said, sure, we'll set up a day to inspect. They came and inspected. Didn't look like there was any extra bedrooms being done, but Sharon saw an attic hatch, and she said, I'd like to inspect up there. And the property manager said, I don't have the key to that. The owner, who's in DC, has the key to that. And she said, that's fine, but I still want to inspect it. He said, I'll get the key for you, and we'll set up a time. They set up a time. It was about a week later, maybe a week later. She goes up to inspect, and I think, I don't know, you might have been, was there? So they go up to inspect, and it looks totally like an attic. There's old clothes, boxes, magazines, all those sort of things. As I recall, Sharon went toward the back of the attic, and she saw a sofa. And she said, how did this sofa get through that little hole? So they looked a little further and realized that in the interim period between the first inspection and the second inspection, they removed a full set of stairs, drywalled in the attic, put a refrigerator downstairs where the stairs went. I mean, they did all this activity. I mean, that's the lengths to which people will go to try and have these extra rental spaces.
because it's very lucrative.
Right, right.
That is not an interesting case. That is an infuriating case.
Right, right.
So I know, Corey, that for today, what you're trying to get us to come to grips with is what we know.
Yes.
And what the scope is of what we know. And trying to solve this, Mayor, is that for a different day?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay, because I don't want to dwell on something that we really should just be satisfied that we understand that evidence is here, it's in front of us, and we need to determine what we're going to do about it, if anything.
when the mayor and I spoke, and Evan as well, for numerous times on this particular subject, we kept getting stuck at the code because we really didn't understand the totality of the problem, the scope. So we jumped over the code into identifying what the scope is to even look at potential enforcement so we can understand that better to maybe come back to the code revisions that are, I think, needed to address. I think Commissioner Gossa said like that 1,000 square foot, if you go back to the 7 foot, it reduces the above ground bulk because you get that below ground ability to put that 1,000 square foot credit. And I think that's one of the bonuses or items of that particular code revision that we were proposing. There was some back and forth as to should we do that one or should we not? Because people said it'll just continue to increase the bulk. And I hope we've brought that forward during this discussion as to what our position was. I think we looked at that one very carefully, and I think this is the logical step in the next. I think we need to look more about the totality, the scope of the problem, what we could potentially do about it to look more in the problem, software, things of that nature, and potential enforcement, and then circle back to the code revision that I think now we all better understand why we were going in that direction.
This is, for me, this is focused on rentals. Is it not possible that non-rentals could also be converting basements unlawfully?
Oh, sure. Yes.
And I'd imagine that less prolific than the rentals, but I think it's a possibility.
You can see the 4 properties for sale right there. Like that's, I mean, whether they were clearly stating they were a rental property or not, or this is just stays in the family, or you still have 2 bedrooms, 4 beds, and a basement that's finished, that is by definition unlawful at that 6'6" category.
One of the elements that I would also like to see us address going forward is the communication of this, because we use the term habitable space or non-habitable space. I don't think people really understand that means bedrooms in the sense that more description of what this really means as habitable or uninhabitable space. That's a technical term, you understand it, but John Q. Public may not have that realization in their mind of what it means. And also curious to know, on the certificate of occupancy that's issued, just in real world, does that go to the builder? Does that go to the real estate agent? Does the homeowner ever see that says on here, basements shall not be used for habitable space?
Sure. So current code for residential new home builds, they're required to give copies of the survey, and we give them 1 copy of the certificate of occupancy that is supposed to go to the homeowner. Usually the general contractor picks it up in the office, but that's the last time that we see the original copy. The city retains a copy of it, but that should be residing with the homeowner.
Well, as many of us know, when you go to settlement for the house, there's a stack of papers and you just start signing and going through them. So you really don't know what a lot of times is connected in there until you look at what I'm really paying the bank for the amount of money I'm getting here. But again, that communication level of what this really means of basement shall not be used as habitable space.
That's one of the things that it's not in my wheelhouse, so to speak, but from my understanding of when you go to close for a house with the bank, they will not close unless you provide them a copy of the certificate of occupancy. So at least in that route, the homeowner as the purchasing agent, the seller, and the bank itself would all have to have been provided a copy of that certificate of occupancy.
But to quote one of my fellow commissioners here, that's kind of like playing office in the sense we get the paperwork done. But in order to make the homeowner, the person that is living in that house, aware of these stipulations, I think we're missing that mark. And part of this, we need to be better informing them of what is at risk here.
I think that's a good point. One of the previous Board of Adjustment meetings that took place was from a purchaser who purchased a property with the full understanding that the basement in that house that they purchased could be used for bedrooms.
It says it in the listings right here that you shared with us. So again, I'm reading this, it must be true type of thing. And very seldom does a homeowner go, on to reconfirm this information. I mean, we've had prime examples of this, of an individual saying, I didn't know the zoning of my house. I thought I live in a house, it must be residential, but you're living in a commercial zone. So again, it's that communication level, and that onus, I think, comes back to us, or at least to make that available to the actual homeowner, not the settling agent, not the bank. I mean, all that has to take place for playing office, but to really inform the homeowner of this is what this space is intended for.
Absolutely.
So as part of the going forward with it, I would like to see those issues addressed.
Yeah, I agree. Corey, you made a statement I'd like to clarify. You said that the people bought the house fully understanding that they could put a basement in or something. The question is, who told them that? I believe it was the builder.
That's correct. It was the builder.
So it wasn't building and licensing.
No, it was not.
The builder erroneously or incorrectly telling them that they could do something beyond what the code allows.
And there's other instances where the owners know perfectly well, it's been stated, and we've had contact with them. They get the certificate of occupancy, and then a couple months down the road, they sell the property, but the city has no knowledge on no bearing on the deed transfers at that point.
Correct.
So the incoming buyers wouldn't know to ask those questions.
Good confirmation. So moving forward, we'll clearly define that 7 foot really is the habitable space, and what is clarified under habitable space. It's a 6'8" clarification, and what is under that 6'8" clarification, which is laundry rooms, bathrooms, I think there's one other thing, hallways or whatever. And so we'll clarify that one as we move forward for our future discussions on this one. And then the 6'6" really is non-habitable space. It's for storage, like clearly putting those definitions associated with the height.
And I'll say just for the last time, which I've mentioned many, many, many times before, I believe the most powerful thing we have is the issuing of the business license for the rental property. And I am very concerned that our processes around the issuance of that may come 5, 10 years after a home is purchased. And I'm not certain that we have taken a really hard look at how difficult that process might need to be when you have a home that has the potential to have that basement used as bedroom space. So I would prefer us to catch it up front when we have the authority to not issue those licenses. And I hate to keep mentioning Mary Ellen, but I hope on her list of things to do, she starts to look at what are our processes without respect to the code that might need to be shored up, so to speak, so that we can get a better handle on these things.
And if you recall, in the weekly update, I sent out some of the strategic solutions, and they're doing a great job helping us map our workflow and our processes. And I think that's really that step one.
Right.
That's going to clearly identify all the applications, permits. How do we go from left to right to get them done? Streamline them, get the portal established, make those easier so those same employees can now dig into the weeds for every single one of them. Because right now, it's just this massive paperwork that they have to do to get the ball rolling for the next year for every permit, every application, every license. And I think that will truly help us peel back the onion on all of these and get better. I really do.
Great, because with your departure coming up, Lawrence, I feel very bolstered by the fact that we're talking about these things in public, and there needs to be great continuity in actually accomplishing these things as even after you exit.
Yeah. I spoke with the consultant, and he was worried about the interim phase, and I reassured him, along with Evans on board with that one. They're coming on board, and they're staying on board to help us map and move forward. They're excited about it because I think it's a great opportunity to help an organization such as ours really see itself and put those systems in place.
City Manager, just a quick question, follow-up to that. And I'd like to associate myself with Commissioner Sharp's comments here on catching this on the front end. But what's the time frame for what you're talking about?
It's in the process right now.
No, but I mean, ultimately, the time frame, so that we're talking about delaying this. Are we delaying this to connect it to that? Because I guess the point is really that just going in and changing the code repeatedly
It's not the right way.
it doesn't fix this problem. It just doesn't fix this problem.
Commissioner, I totally agree. I think correlating the two entities, and I'll leave it up to Evan if he wants to chime in on this one. I think you have to map, get the workflow, get the system in place before you start moving after something like this, because you're really going to put the cart before the horse if you try to do so. But you're spot on. It's a great point.
Thank you for that clarification. Corey, I have one question just for you, just a favor to ask, if you will. I'm sure it's somewhere, but what does 7 feet mean? From where to where?
Oh, good question, because that's also...
You don't need to answer me now, but when we tell people, I hope we are telling them that.
Yes.
Perfect.
And previous presentations, I think, have diagrams, so
Thank you.
It's
I appreciate it.
I just want to clarify the statistics that you're showing on the screen did not include this is strictly new construction, not a renovation?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're not even addressing that, which is just as applicable.
Yes, this is only that the permits that were pulled and approved and finalized for new home build residentials.
Okay, because I believe I had a renovation of my basement, I think in this time frame, so I'm assuming I'm not included. And I'd
No,
like to be.
yeah, the numbers would be much more if we included those.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Corey. With that, I can go to the members of the public. Is there anybody that wants to say anything? Nick, if you want to come to the microphone and identify yourself in relationship to the city, please.
My name's Nick Walls. I'm a planner consultant with the city here. I just was wondering if you happen to see if any of the unlawful basements occurred in the floodplain, and looking at that cross between your flood boundaries and the basements.
That's a good question. I have not in these past 5 years.
That might give you another avenue for enforcement. Anyway, thank you.
That's a great point.
Thank you, Nick. Frank, and then Francis.
Yes, I
Your
totally
name
agree
in
with...
relationship to the city.
Excuse me, Frank Cooper, 96 Eastlake Drive. I totally agree with Tony Sharp that the rental license, it's the money that matters here. And what we're seeing is blatantly advertising breaking the law. And so we need to enable building and licensing to be able to enforce these blatant cases, to send the message. I mean, this is, right now, it's a competitive market. I mean, if these people are allowed to get away with advertising that these spaces are bedrooms in 6 basements, then that kind of raises the market bar. I mean, you're a fool if you don't do that. It's the same thing. My issue with swimming pools was that the fact is that they get more money for them, so everybody feels the need to do that when they are thinking about investing millions of dollars into a house. And so if you de-incentivize it, I think it will go a long way without having to change a whole lot of code, just being able to enforce the rules we have, and especially the ones that are advertising it, which is really kind of outrageous when you think about it, that they are advertising breaking the law. And so we need to be able to let building and licensing go in there and make them demolish it if it's bedrooms or bathrooms or whatever, and really put some teeth into it. And I think the problem will go away pretty quickly if they think the city is going to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Francis, come ahead.
Francis Kelleher resident, so two good segues for me, because I would actually say, I wanted to echo what a lady came up and said at the last time this issue about basements was discussed, and she said, I have an outrageous suggestion, but to me, it wasn't outrageous at all. It's the facing of the reality that if you have height, then they are going to finish it. Her suggestion was it should count, whether it's 6'6", 6'8", or you want to say 7, they're going to finish it. So I think we should really go back to the fundamental principle of what by regulation the basement height should be. And I think, and I'll preface this by saying, I think it was a good attempt by Mayor Cooper and other commissioners in the past to try to control the situation by having that bit of a lower ceiling, and that would enable storage but discourage the people finishing them and using for habitation. But I think people have to get their heads out of the sand now and face the reality that that is not discouraging. That is not discouraging at all. People are finishing them home, and it's not just focusing on the rentals. It's focusing on the large percentage, the 78 out of 122, the 63% that are putting in the basements, and they're just going, as long as there's height, they're going to continue. So I wanted to link it to my old Nanacoke home, and I guess it was, yes, cheaper way of building the Nanacokes. They all had, and now I'm going to link it with attics. So they all had very low slopes. I think they're 712s or something like that. Well, you go up in my attic, my drop-down steps, I can go up there and I can stand in the middle. But there would never be any thought of trying to finish off that attic because the ceiling is probably just about that high. But if you have a high ceiling, which you see in these new builds, they've got windows up in their attic spaces, blah, 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 they're going to finish them. That's the whole point. They plan ahead. They actually do the stuff ahead. And I have actually some proof of that, Mayor Mills, that I could show you on the house next door to me, where they actually pre-plan how they're going to end up breaking the codes as when they're doing their builds. They've got it set up for as soon as the inspection is done and the COA is issued, then they can make these other changes. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm diverging a little bit. But what I wanted to say was that back in the older days, so anyway, back to the height, that, I think the city needs to face the idea that if they need to regulate the floor, the FAR, and count anything that has, reasonable height, whether it's in the attic or it's in the cellar or in the basement, and that's what has to be done. It's not a matter of trying to regulate these renters, and because it goes on everywhere. And again, the houses change hands, the homeowners' houses change hands, they become rentals, and vice versa. So it's the house itself, and I agree with the idea, do it up front, but it needs to be done up front when the building is going on, and not continue to allow the building of high enough spaces to make them worth converting into habitable areas. Mr. Wallace brought up a point that I wanted to bring up, which is I want to raise the issue to the city commissioners, ask for an assessment, ask for looking into this issue of these basements contributing to the drainage issues. I remember Commissioner Legree commenting the day he gave the talk about the driveways and the permeable driveways, and he said something, I couldn't build a permeable driveway on my property because the water table is too high, and when he was describing the depth that the stones and the underlaying needed to be in order to put a permeable thing on top. So it's sort of like, you know, I've had flooding in my yard, my crawl space, ever since, you know, the neighbors who didn't pass the perk test, so they couldn't build a full basement, but they built a poured concrete deep crawl space, and then they built a giant, well, not giant, because you can't build a giant pool, but they built a pool in the back. So my, you know, issue again is, I think the city needs to look at the contribution of these deep concrete holes, whether they're basements or pools, on the whole, you know, I'm not a hydraulic engineer, on the whole water system and the drainage. And I am just going to point out, because I had looked this up the last time that this basement topic came up, and I know in our city, but I don't really know why, and I couldn't actually dig back to find the actual reason, but we changed the definition of cellar versus basement, and we made it all basement. But in a lot of municipalities, there's a real distinction between a cellar and a basement. And a basement being, you know, built all to code that becomes habitable, safe, it has the egresses, et cetera, that it actually is habitable, whereas the cellar definitions go more along the idea of they don't have, they're more like storage, old storage cellars. But I don't know why the city changed that. I don't know if that comes into play. I have a sneaky suspicion they changed it because it wasn't mattering much. People weren't, you know, going by the old definitions of linking a basement with a habitable space, linking a cellar with a storage. So they just got rid of it. But I really think that it's not about the code of, you know, renting or trying to catch it. I mean, I think we have to pursue, of course, I'm all for that, catching it afterwards. But there needs to be a big change up front, or this is just going to continue, because there never were houses in my neighborhood. They were mainly like Nanticokes, plopped down on concrete block, and now every house that's being built has cellars and pools. It's changing everything in the nneighborhood. It's affecting, to me, drainage, at least it seems to, but I'm asking officially for a look into that. Are these deep concrete holes, and they're the house, and then they're the pool? And it sure seems to me, I'm going to say this too while I'm up here, is, you know, when I look at some of these layouts for these, you know, all these tear downs right near my house, and the poured basement sections, that I'm like, how on earth are they meeting our 50% natural space? Because there sure doesn't look like there's 50% natural space when you see all that is encompassed by the pool and the house basement area.
Thank you, Francis. I can assure you, and maybe you just take 30 seconds to respond, that you do accurate calculations on natural and FAR and all that stuff. So I assure you, anything that gets a building permit is going to be compliant with the code.
That's correct. That's one of the main things that go on in plan review, is holding them to that standard.
No, and I do know that, but it's sort of like, it still seems, woo, whatever. It's very close. And then I'll bring up and yes, then we get the people who have the full basements that are meant for storage coming before the Board of Adjustment asking to build their sheds, because these 50-year-olds, you know, with minor sports injuries, blah, 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 can no longer carry their bikes up and down the steps. So they need a shed for storage. So it's like, it's just, who was it? Commissioner LaGree, who talked about everything is interconnected, everything, and he was talking about, the lakes, the stormwater and all of that, but like everything is interconnected.
Thank you, Francis. Frank, will you have a quickie so we can keep moving on?
I'd like to take issue with the former speaker. This is Frank Cooper, 96 Eastlake Drive. There are basements in this town. My house is considerably older than Country Club is, period, and it has a full basement. And there's a bunch of houses in my neighborhood that have basements. A lot of the older houses do. So it's not like it's not part of our culture. And the fact was that the city was quite right in assuming that stuff underground did not increase the bulk above ground, which was destroying the character of the neighborhood. The building code is fine as far as the 6.6 storage goes. If you want to come see my basement, it's full of storage. I guarantee you that. There's not enough room for a bed down there. But the fact is that really I think it really goes back to the enforcement of the laws that are on the books, which are adequate were they enforced. I have a question for Mr. Mandalis. Building and licensing can't just inspect houses, but when they issue a building permit for the year, do they have the right to inspect at that time?
When they issue a building permit?
Yeah, let's say a renewal for a building permit. Would they be permitted to re-inspect a home on
Like
the
a
reissuance?
renovation or an addition?
No, a rental permit for a home.
Oh, a rental permit.
A regular rental permit. Would they be allowed to re-inspect a home upon reissuance of a yearly? So if they had the manpower, they could go out and look at these houses.
That's my understanding, yes.
And so if there's any question about what's going on with that, even if they don't, if Corey or somebody would see something online where they were advertising this, they could go in and verify that this was the case and say that this is in fact non-compliant.
Yeah,
and
that's
take
correct. At reissuance,
remedial action. Could they not?
That's right. At reissuance, they could. The only what I mentioned earlier is that people are pretty crafty and they will take all those beds out of there at reissuance time, and we'll go in, we'll inspect, it'll look perfectly fine, and a day later, those beds we'll issue the license, and then a day later, those beds will go back in. It's amazing the lengths to which people will go to fool these guys.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Sure.
I just want to explain. Francis Kelleher, my motives are really, I think about the kids in Philadelphia who end up being burned to death in fires, who are sleeping in illegal spaces. So that's really my motive. And I live in an old 1920s house in the town of Bellefonte. We have an old cellar. We have an attic. Of course, we use our cellar for storage like you, Mayor Mills. I was going to say, Mayor Mills, you might be the only one in the city who uses your cellar for storage. So I'm not intrinsically against cellars. I have cellar envy. When I have to crawl in my crawl space, I think, oh, why didn't Nanticoke tell me I could have built a cellar? So I have nothing against the cellars. But I think in this town in particular, there's just so much greed. So yeah, how do you try to control, it's a sad situation of controlling people who do the wrong thing versus, yes, the regular, or the people who do the right thing. It's a real conundrum.
Thank you, Francis. Anybody else?
So Mayor, what exactly is our next step on this?
You tell me. Yeah, I think the key to this is prevention, deterrent, and something else I can't remember. And I think we need to work with the building licensing and city manager to make some proposals on how to try to resolve this. So would you be amenable to working with Evan in building and licensing to try to come up with the next path forward? This is, would you want to add anything?
Well, I guess I was thinking that with the with the new director coming, I would ask that this be brought to her attention. She's certainly going to come into our community with a fresh perspective, I hope, on business processes. And maybe it's something to give her a heads up that we're talking about this right now and would like maybe a brief assessment. I don't want to bog down brand-new people with so much expectation that they can't really get a grasp on their departments. But I would like someone with a new perspective to look at this and see where are our avenues of opportunity on this.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I think enforcement and deterrent all comes from their department. They give us the best guidance on this. I think we've heard enough up here that the commissioners want to resolve this. And so we'll continue. All right?
Just one more comment, if
Go
I may.
ahead.
Just, Corey, I just want to thank you for the work that you put into this. It's very enlightening and helped us understand the process better and the challenges better. And I know this has taken time away from your real work, if you will, but I do appreciate the time invested in this. It really helps a lot. Thank you.
Ditto from all of us. Thank you very much, Corey. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Corey.
With that, we're going to move on to the next item of old business, C, which is discussion of Section 33 of City Charter and Title 22, Chapter 7, Section 708 of State Code as they relate to construction of the new Beach Patrol / Comfort Station facility at the end of Baltimore Avenue. If you recall, Section 33 of the Charter requires us to conduct a public hearing to hear any objections of the abandonment of a street. And we are holding off on holding that public hearing until such time as the Planning Commission issues us a report. It's not worded as a recommendation, but as a report to come back to us. And I wanted to go over the timeline with you real quick. The Planning Commission was tasked September 29th with Section 708 of State Code, which remands it to a city municipal planning commission to evaluate and do a report on the abandonment or altering of streets. The Planning Commission met on an accelerated basis. They were able to squeeze it in the agenda, and they met on October 6th, it was the last Friday. They heard from members of the audience and property owners, and they had a lively discussion among themselves. And their path forward is that they tasked the solicitor for the Planning Commission, Luke Mehta, with coming up with a report based on the conversations that took place during that meeting on October 6th. The expectation is that when the Planning Commission next meets on Thursday, November 2nd, that they will have received that report and be discussing it in a public meeting. Just so happens that they have a regular meeting on the next day, which is Friday, November 3rd, so that perhaps gives them two opportunities to receive the report and refine it. So I'm very hopeful that they're able to get us that final report on the altering of the street by Friday, November 3rd, in which case, if that happens, then I would plan on conducting the public hearing to address Section 33 of the Charter, which is holding the public hearing to receive objections on any negative impacts on private property owners on the 17th, which is our regular meeting day.
Of November.
Of November, correct. So at the earliest, I would expect to have this public hearing and resolve this issue on Friday, November 17th. But again, I can't firm up that date for the public hearing until we actually receive that report from the Planning Commission. Is there any further comment or question on this topic?
I just have one recap, I think. I want us to all think about the last words that we got in our last meeting on this on September 29th were from Commissioner Preston. And he brought us to the focus of we need to take stock in this process while it's fresh in all of our minds. And I think we all understand that over time, as time passes, sometimes we don't come back to things that we thought we would, or we don't come back to them in a timely fashion. So I don't want us to lose track of the fact that the processes that brought us here were not necessarily beneficial to us. So the items that I talked about were that I expected better performance with attention to detail on behalf of the commissioners in the city, credible documents for the Planning Commission to work with, and I hope they were all there and available to them and on time. And I will plea once again that documents are really, I believe, less for the commissions and more for the public. So when we get documents 24 hours ahead of time or 48 hours ahead of time, I thought that was the whole reason for having a 7-day or a 5-day or whatever the posting requirement is. So maybe we could get better on that. The timeline impact with per-day penalties that the city may or may not be incurring, I think is something we need to be particularly transparent about. The accountability for this. Our city solicitor talked last time about taking partial responsibility for this, and I'm still going to get the answer, which was not clear to me last time, of who takes the rest of the accountability for it. Not because of trying to hold someone's feet to the fire, so that this does not happen again. And I've said before, we do not appear to learn from experiences that we have. Oftentimes we repeat them. All you have to do is change the topic, and we repeat and we repeat and we repeat. And the last thing I have is I know we have good intentions, or I have been told so, that all the businesses, I thought, on Baltimore would be contacted and engaged with. I don't know with clarity that that's happened yet, but I'm very hopeful that's in the process. So if anybody can talk about that for just a moment, that would be
Lawrence, if you,
helpful.
Lawrence will respond.
Yes, Commissioner, great question and comment. All of the businesses were either, or actually both, mailed. We actually had the code enforcement walk mailers to every one of the businesses. Emails and potentially mailings were actually distributed to the owners that we have on record. So multiple, and then Lynn, I believe, pushed something out on the social media. So we tried every opportunity, every mechanism we have, every meeting we have to make sure that the owners or representatives or business were contacted. And we
And
called
that's everybody on Baltimore Avenue,
up both blocks.
both blocks, okay.
For the Planning Commission meeting. Yes. Very good. Well, I think you did a good summary right there, you know, so you let me know if you want to put this on again or something to delve in deeper.
Well, I think I think as we approach knowing more about the evaluation report from the Planning Commission and how all that timing is going to work, I won't be forgetting any of this. So I hope to be productive with better processes going forward.
Sounds good. Any other commissioners?
Just along with the report back as discussions, perhaps on the 17th meeting, just a reminder that, as Commissioner Sharp said, sometimes we forget things or they are not timely responded to. On Friday, August 18th, we did pass the motion to award the contract for the Beach Patrol building for $4,897,000, provided the city takes the following actions. And again, I would just like to follow up on these at the meeting of the 17th, if they have been accomplished. One was to escalate and provide ongoing awareness and information to our property owners as outlined by our city manager's notes. 2, to reconvene the Wilmington-Baltimore Avenue Streetscape Task Force and commit to incorporating their recommendations in planning for the landscaping and streetscape at the end of Baltimore Avenue. And 3, to conduct meetings with the developers and businesses to discuss streetscape input and incorporate their input into the city's plans. So again, if we could react to those 3, that were the conditions of approving the $4,897,000 award, that those conditions are being met for the forward progress of the building.
Sure. Would you send Lawrence and me that list?
Be happy to.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Anybody else up here?
I just have a final ask, or actually curiosity. I was going to bring it up during the committee discussions. Has a date been set to reconvene the Baltimore-Wilmington Streetscape Task Force?
No.
What's the date?
No, Lawrence and I have met and we're waiting on to talk with Rossi, I think, to be able to have an outline. I want to be able to have an outline for that group to tell them why we're reconvening and what our objectives are, and that's still being developed.
Okay.
But we did go back and do the preliminary research to make sure that we have the task force initial charter, to make sure their initial directions pulled in, so it gets us back, rebluing us ourselves to understand what the task force.
So just narrow it, 30, 60, 90, 120 days, what do you think? Give yourself a range.
What do you think, within 60 days? I'll probably be in contact before then, but I would say possibly 60 days. Again, we need to get that input from Rossi, so we need to meet with them. Thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Any members of the public? All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is new business. First item of new business, you have a support document on, and that is to, we need to consider reappointment or appointment of somebody to fill the seat on the Board of Elections. Stephen Simmons has served as chair for many, many years, multiple terms, and he is welcoming to be reappointed. And so I'm suggesting and nominating him for reappointment as member and chair of the Board of Elections. Is there any discussion or questions? You can see over there, we've got Ned Kesmetal, Steve Curson, and then as of last year, I think we started appointing an alternate, which is Carl Pierce, so that if somebody got sick at the last minute or something, somebody could step in, they'd already be appointed. Any questions or comments?
I support this slate.
All right.
So do I.
I do too.
Any members of the public? Nope. We'll move on to the next item of business, which is to review committee policies, including but not limited to processes for selection of committee agenda topics and membership rules relative to non-resident members. So there's really 2 items I want to focus on, but the agenda allows us to delve deeper into the committee policy handbook in case you would like to. And so just to reiterate again, we do have a committee handbook that is issued to all the committees, committee chairs, and the commissioners that has policy in it. That is included as a support document in today's agenda. And really the discussion points I want to focus on today is, do the commissioners want to continue with the practice of allowing, I call them out-of-town members, to sit on committees in a non-voting capacity? If you recall in the support documents, voting members, this is within the policy.
What page, Mayor?
Page 51 of 136. Maybe I can.
Mayor, while you're working on that.
Yeah, let me find
in reviewing this and preparing for this discussion, it's been a while since committees and what have you come to mind and what have you. So for just clarification in my old mind here, I prepared this little list that I can pass down here, just so we know what we're dealing with regards to boards, commissions, committees, and where they're, how many we've got, and who's, not who's on it, but just what we consist of, that, and you can pass it along to, there's, I think, enough copies to go out to the audience if they want to, but just breaks it out to boards and commissions, the committees, mayoral appointed committees, our task force, and sunsetted committees. So just to help me get a grasp of really what we're talking about.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. With that, again, the one of two topics that I wanted to talk about today, this has to do with membership on the committee. And if you recall, current policy says voting commission members shall be comprised of residents, property owners, and business owners of the city of Rehoboth Beach. But the committee may also include non-voting members with specialized expertise who are not residents, property owners, and business owners of the city of Rehoboth Beach. One action on this could certainly be to do nothing. Another action could possibly be to reconsider even having non-voting members that are not residents, property owners, or business owners of the city. I bring that up because I think we've only got one or two committees that have non-resident property owners on it. And I've received complaints over the past year or so that some of those non-resident property owner and non-business owners of the city have been voting in city committees. And again, the policy says they are to be non-voting. I know the way that I have always chaired meetings is that anybody that comes to the meeting is allowed to talk. I allow everybody. So they don't need to be members of the committee necessarily to be able to offer their opinion and everything. I've even invited them up to the table with us if there's just one or two. So that is a consideration I just wanted to put in front of us. Are we happy with allowing non-voting members being a member? Now, be aware that the task force members may be residents, property owners, and business owners of the city, or may live or work outside the city. So a task force is a little different type of agency. We are allowing people from the outside, if you will. So I guess before I go on to item 2, I'd like to address this. Are we comfortable just leaving this alone and just reminding the chairs that non-residents, non-property owners, non-business owners of the city are non-voting members, and we need to adhere to that? Does anybody have a feeling on the desire to maintain this or change it? Bunky?
I would just say that I think having non-voting, non-residential is still valuable, especially for committees. I'm speaking of primarily like with trees and green infrastructure, where there's a certain level of expertise and interest, and maybe that it's hard to find people in, if your pool of potential members is strictly within the city, So I mean, I think it would be helpful to have that latitude, even if you restrict it to being voting or non-voting.
Okay. Ed, you care to offer anything? You've got, I think, the most non-residents.
Yeah, I agree with Punky, and perhaps this is my fault. It's more perception than anything, but I have allowed all of the members to vote when we're talking about different items, and I would only, I guess, do a roll call vote if there was going to be any type of controversy or it wasn't unanimous. And perhaps that's more of a perception thing than anything in how I've conducted my meetings with the Environment Committee, and perhaps I can be more diligent in only having the voting members vote. I just didn't see it necessary to date.
I wasn't going to reveal that it was you, but but you do chair the two committees with non-residents, so.
My committee also has non-residents, and I have allowed them to vote as well, not knowing.
I
So-
honestly believe that the mayor's comment on if folks that are non-residents have enough interest, why wouldn't they be coming to the meetings anyway and being allowed to speak? If they're not allowed to vote, and y'all as chairs will correct that, not a perhaps you will correct it, it should be you will correct it. But to me, I hear the same complaint that folks say they really do not appreciate, meaning our residents, our in-town people, that people who are not residents of our town are on our committees. And if we have the opportunity to change it, why wouldn't we take that opportunity?
Well, for me, the same comment with a little more specificity. The constituents come to me and say, why are we allowing outsiders to tell us what to do? Because we've recently, from some committees, heard recommendations to amend some laws and everything. So that's where I think some of them are come from. It's not a big amount of complaint, but
Well, and I do want to say that this is a topic for me that I would like to see our entire committee structure revamped. I have an idea for that. That is not for today, but I would think anything that we can do to make our own residents more aware that we value them greatly, I would be in favor of doing that.
well, we're here
Second.
today. We've got these committees that are ongoing.
What did you say, Tim? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I do think the committee structures need to be looked at.
And as I say, that's not for today. I will bring that up again, but to make this as valuable of an experience that it can be for the people who are on the committees, the more straightforward we are, the more we give the committees charges of what we would like to see them do and what we'd like them to bring forward, I think is also a very valuable coupling here.
Well, I will say, I'll give it for instance, the two of the committees, for instance, on here have voted opposite for the same issue. And I suppose that's then to come to us, but I think it's somewhat counterproductive. I'll talk about dogs on the beach. The Animal Issues Committee voted to, yes, we should have dogs on the beach and change the hours for boardwalk. Beach and Boardwalk unanimously voted no. So who takes precedence? And are we just, so these committees meet in a vacuum, and then in order to come here to try to hash it out, I just think, to me, that's counterproductive.
I don't know that I agree 100%. By the way, that topic will be on our November workshop meeting.
Right.
But you know, we've got different committees with different missions, and you know, the Animal Issues has one perspective, and the Boardwalk Committee has a different perspective, and I respect that, and they have different.
But who takes precedent?
Well, that's for us to
They
decide.
both send a report in, evaluate or articulating what the pros and cons are and what their objectives are in their eyes, refresh their memory of what the mission statement is, and then give us their report and their analysis. And then it's up to us that we have received from two committees, which is what, a total of 10, 15, 16 people, what their perspective and recommendation is. So I value that myself.
Well, and Mayor, I think one of the things that goes to Commissioner Bennett's point is that we're structured in silos. It's all silo-driven. It's not a generalist perspective of the entire city. So it goes to the question, well, then who decides? Who takes precedent over? So whenever I can get the topic of revamping the committee structures on the agenda, I'll talk at great length about the value of generalists versus silo thinking.
All right, thank you. So,
I just wanted to clarify my statement. I was really speaking I was thinking rather committees, not commissions, and not the code-defined committees.
But
So-
we are only talking about committees and task force. We're not talking
Right,
about
right. And
commissions,
that's
Board of
what I was-
Adjustment,
that's what I was
Parks and Shade Tree
pertaining to.
Commission. Those have their own rules by code and by law. So, again, I have two topics here. It sounds like we should just leave the non-residents, non-property owners and non-business owners policy as it is, and maybe I just reinforce to the chairs that they're not supposed to vote. Now, what you can do is the minutes can reflect the vote taken, and that so many of the membership, this is how they voted, and of those non-voters, here's what their perspective is.
I've already said, but maybe you didn't hear. I don't agree with that.
I understand, but Ed agrees with it. Bunky agrees with it. Tim, I didn't know how to read you. I think maybe you were okay with it because you've got,
I inherited it. I thought that's what we did. So I haven't,
Well, but what do you want to do now?
Yeah,
Mayor,
Don't cop out. No,
I mean, if it was very clear and direct to me, I think it should just be residents.
I do as well.
Mayor, if I may offer just a comment here. So Commissioner Sharp also just put on the table something that I agree with. That's very important to do is to look at our committee structure, task force structure as well. And to, I'll use my words, not hers, rationalize the how they interact. And I suppose we could hold off doing anything here on this right now, as long as we're committed to doing what she just asked for soon.
well,
I would also just add my comments that I've received and agree with the fact that non-residents should not be a part of committees. If you break it down from the standpoint of voting, that is the distinguishing factor. But to be realistic about it, if you're a committee member, you're going to be involved in the conversations. Your comments, your ideas, your motivations are going to be a strong part of that discussion, which makes up even coming to a vote for the committee. So again, I just feel that non-committee members, non-residents should not be part of the committees. And to give you a little background on it, the committee handbook, I was the author of that handbook several years ago. And it was quite the experience in, we use the term making sausage, but I think in Delaware it's making scrapple. And the aspect of the non-residents or people with expertise in the area we're really bringing in for consulting basis of pricing of convention center, the aspect of permits and how to manage parades and events in the city. And at that time, I proposed modeling after one of our personnel ordinance, which is they talk about consultants. The commission, and this is regarding the personnel committee, but it's a parallel, in my opinion, that consultants, the commissioners may contract with consultants for the performance of technical services in the operation of the personnel system. So again, looking for, as we have heard from our consultant for today on parking, what have you, that to me is the aspect that those professional services or those professional expertise should be brought to those committees and not through individuals that are non-residents. We're very fortunate in this city to be able to have non-resident voters, but property owners. But again, bringing those individuals in a committee to the table, even though they, quote, can't vote, there's still a very lively discussion that they are a part of and bring their views to the table. So again, I am not in favor of it, was not in favor of it at that time also. But following up also on Commissioner Sharp, when you bring this new topic to the point or to discussion, I would also like to see each committee annually report on their accomplishments for the year and what has the committee proposed and what have they accomplished in their meetings in the year. I think it's a fair evaluation. Thank you.
Mayor, if you are asking us to decide today, I will vote no on non-residents.
No, on what?
I will vote no on non-residents.
On having non-resident.
What, is it the trees and green infrastructure, animal issues, and environment committee? Really the three committees that we're talking about here?
Well, it could be any of the committees. I mean, the Boardwalk Committee and all those. This is something that will be on the October regular meeting. So we've all got a little more time to think about it. And I know what where Tony is headed. I'm just concerned, trying to consider what the timing is on that. So it will be a future topic, and I'll let you lead the conversation on it.
Sure, and I don't see the discussion of a revamp to hold up anything that we need to, or that we want with continuity with the current committee.
Okay.
Because it may take us a very long time to even think about it or decide if there are more advantages than disadvantages. That's what I'm interested in hearing. But I don't think they're tied together at all.
And just for reference, again, I think part of the embedded information was former Commissioner Gay provided a list of what our neighboring communities provide on committee membership, and we're the only ones that allow outside.
Okay, let's give time for the public to be able to respond to this and put it on a future agenda topic. But I wanted to introduce the topic today. I will go to the members of the public, sure, but what I'd like to do is go to my second topic, and that is my belief that all the committees and task force, well, the committees primarily, that the committee chair should bring the proposed or potential topics for their agendas to the commissioners. And so that we get a buy-in. Right now, the policy just says, bring it forward, submit your topics to the commissioners for awareness. I want to go stop further and make it a dictate, or at least consider making it a dictate, in that our committees consume a lot of time for our staff, for the police chief, for the communications specialist, for all kinds of people to show up, building and licensing, to come to these meetings and invest in time. And I guess I also hear from members of the committees that, oh, we just spend all these hours on talking about topic ABC, and then the commissioners turned it down. Well, again, if we had a mandate that you have to bring your committee topics to this board up here and let us talk about them, we at least would have awareness of the topics, and maybe we would bless the topics. Not in saying that we absolutely endorse it, but what we endorse is them investing time in it and doing research and bringing back us a report. That is my goal, just a mere quick change in the policy to dictate that. Now, that'll require them to think ahead, because that doesn't mean at the August meeting, they can propose something for their September meeting. They have to bring it to the commissioners. So that's going to add a month of time to it before they can put it on their agenda. I think it's reasonable. I think it's prudent to do that kind of thing. Again, consumes a lot of city staff, city secretary, and I think that may be a way to cut down on some of it, and that's to confirm that we indeed at least have an interest. And so I guess I'd like some feedback on that.
So will we debate the topic?
No, not at all, not at all.
So
If we resolve the dogs on the beach thing.
right, if I said one of the topics will be dogs on the beach, and we all say no,
Let's say we say whatever we say, and then one of your members objects with it and asks to have that on the agenda 9 months from now. and the new chair, maybe there's a new chair that says, okay, that's good. I would suggest that if they brought it to us, we would say, no, within the last year, we talked about those dogs, and we don't want to take it up again, maybe after 5 more years. So that for me is the intent. I'm perfectly fine leaving it alone, but I would at least impress upon them that they have to tell us ahead of time what is on the agenda, because the policy says submit to the commissioners for awareness. Anybody?
I would like to take it a step further, that committees should be able to answer the questions, what is it that you want to talk about, and more importantly, why? What is the case that you're trying to solve and why? I've been on enough committees over time, that's why I do not chair one now, that often you spend a lot of time talking about individuals' pet issues. So I would like to see a broader view from not only the chairs, but from the committee themselves as to exactly what is it that you want to spend time talking about, and more importantly, why.
That could be a condition of bringing us
Yes.
their topics. Here's 3 topics we'd like to talk about.
Well, because I don't want to be in a discussion, and please don't ever put it on the upcoming agenda that says dogs on the beach. That's a big topic.
Oh, no, it's very specific.
Yes,
topic.
but that's an example.
Yeah.
And I thought, Mayor, maybe I dreamt this, I thought we as commissioners had talked, maybe it wasn't this term that I'm serving, maybe it was a different one, about whether or not committee work should be commissioner-driven or not.
Well,
Did I make that up?
Well, if you go through the minutes, you could see what's been written, and I haven't found that written out that way.
No, it wasn't written out. I thought it was a discussion that we were unhappy with how much time and effort that was being taken for the committee work, because I completely appreciate what you're talking about staff, of all levels of staff. And I refer to them as a time suck, just an absolute time suck for staff. And I'm not certain, when we have to talk about things that we don't enforce or this or that or the other, where are we spending all of our time? So I'm a big proponent of getting a tighter grasp on how we are giving instruction, guidance, vision, et cetera.
Anybody else?
I agree completely. And I agree with Commissioner Sharp that I think committees should be commissioner topic driven. I mean, for example, I probably spend the most amount of time chairing the Environment Committee, which is frustrating as heck. If there's no appetite here on this commission to even talk about topics or even consider topics that we end up spending dozens of hours in committee time talking about. So I agree, the entire committee system needs to be restructured, and it needs to be more thoughtful in the topics. And I think we need to be the driving factor on what topics are discussed and considered. So I agree with that completely.
Well, Commissioner, one example might be using your committee that you might have brought forward the thought of banning gasoline-powered engines or something. And I probably would have said, yeah, I think that's worth investigating. Now, you know what the end result was. I didn't support it, but I think that I would have in good conscience said, yes, let's go forward with that. That's worth investing the committee time in. And then your report, being thorough enough, showed me that I'm leaning the other way, But
I think that's a good example because, as Commissioner Shanowski said, I watched their meeting, and they did spend an awful lot of time and thought into it. And we just kind of we said no. But I think we should have said, or had gone back to the committee and said, we like the idea, but A, B, and C, you know, is there a stair step to do it, or is there another way we can get to the same result without doing a strong mandate? Because I do feel like they spent a lot of time on it, and we just said no, rather than looking at what some of the other communities did, like Lewis, in that they've already experienced this and did a stair step to get there. And I think we might have, as a body, accepted that rather than just saying no and dismissing with the work that they did. So I could understand the frustration.
Well, does everybody like the concept of me just going to the chairs and saying, you know, this submittal to the commissioners for awareness of potential future agenda topics for your committee, we would like to make it mandatory?
Yes.
And then devise a system, how do they approach us so that we can say, in fact, there's a report template that we use. You know, what's the objective? What's the goals? It's not going to be a full report, but it's just going to be enough of an idea to give us the ability to analyze and say whether we want to invest time in it or not. Everybody else?
So that would be the first step before, and once this board approves on the topic, then you set the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that is a thought.
Well, wouldn't that get us away from, there's an animal issues committee meeting every 30 days. And there's an animal issues committee meeting when there's a need to have an animal issues committee meeting.
Right.
Because we seem to be on this wheel of, you got to have a meeting. Well, you don't have to have a meeting if you don't have something that's either supported or the commissioners have an interest in.
Well, unless there's objection, I'd like to head that way,
Yeah.
okay? And then we've already talked about, in a future meeting, analyzing the committee structure process in a different way. So we can certainly do that. By the way, you know, committees and task force membership is generally there until you finish a task.
Mhm.
So the Wilmington Baltimore Task Force group could be together for 3 years, who knows? The other committees are appointed until they are reappointed or till somebody else takes their seat. So I'm not in any hurry to reappoint any of the committees. They're all members currently, and my expectation is that they will continue to stay members unless they notify the chair otherwise. So there's no deadline there to act on. So is there anybody from the public want to say anything? Francis, come ahead. Tell us who you are, dear.
Francis Kelleher, resident. I'd just like to add just a little thing to what Commissioner Charnowski said. I think it should be iterative. So maybe not totally driven by the board, because I think, well, I brought a topic to the Environmental Committee because I thought they were the right group to go to in the first place about a certain issue. And so I do think there should be, but I think it could be driven, a topic could come from the committee or, you know, to the board. But I think what's really important is that iterative step in corporate America, we called it stakeholder management, so that the committee would, you know, then touch base, check in with the board to see if a given topic then is something that you do have an appetite for. So I think it should go back and forth. And then I'm just going to use that example about the gas-powered motor or equipment, is that I think there does need to be, like, not even just the first check-in of is the topic something worth pursuing or investigating, but then to come back at intermediate, because then you don't go to the full-blown thing of doing all the work to write an ordinance and that, if that wasn't the right direction. So I do really think a good back and forth is what would really help and keep things, you know, in an efficient way instead of just, talk, and then a lot of work done when maybe it was just a step too far, maybe just going in a little bit of the wrong direction. So I think everything that Commissioner Sharp has brought up today is really important and helpful for efficiency and to help get things done and not just flounder for long periods of time and nobody does anything on it.
Thank you, Francis.
On that, thank you, Francis. On that note, my hope is that Engagement HQ is going to help drive important issues that, to our residents, filter to committee work based on, them airing certain issues, concerns, things that are important to them. So my hope is that we, at some point, get to a space where we're using that tool to drive what we're talking about up here on this board as well as others.
I couldn't agree more.
Same here.
Reach out, Rehoboth.
Keep it right here.
All righty. No other public members?
I'm like freezing.
We go to the next item of new business, which is an update from Lynn Cohen, Communications Specialist, on goals and proposals received for a new city website, and then after that, we'll do sister cities. So you go. Thank you.
Mayor, Commissioners, and public, if you notice, there's a new document embedded into the agenda. This is the what I've been talking about for the last several weeks. This document is called the Agenda Item Report. It's used by numerous cities across the United States or some form of variation thereof. What this allows the staff to do, take a topic from inception to completion and allows the topic to be added from a workshop to a regular Board of Commissioners meeting with almost no effort at all, and it also brings along every embedded document right along with it. So there's no loss of the topic or things of that nature. On this thing, you'll see we've gone multiple variations. Joe, that is page number 60 of 138. If you can go up a little bit. Oh, Lynn, go up to.
It's on mine.
Yeah. So that's.
I just had that item open.
So that's the agenda item report. It has purpose, background, has all the elements that we think are fairly applicable to certain topics as we move forward. And the staff has shown great interest and also enthusiasm for this because you can also take key elements. Once you all pass, should you pass any particular topic, that can be brought right to Lynn's attention, and she can pull everything out right there and do a press release within just minutes without almost no effort at all. So just kind of wanted to bring that up real quick. So I'll turn it right over to Lynn.
Good morning, Commissioners, Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to come before you and talk about our new website in the works. So as you may recall, Commissioners approved $40,000 in the FY24 budget to update and redevelop the city's website. And I wanted to speak with you this morning about goals for the new website update that staff have developed. Want to see if you have additional goals in mind. And I also wanted to share with you information about two of the proposals that we have received and see if we can find consensus on a path forward. So briefly, so I'm going to highlight a few of the goals that we have in mind as we look to redevelop the website. One in particular is that we would like the website to be function and service oriented rather than department oriented. We don't want folks to have to know how City Hall is structured in order to find what it is they want to do on the website. Also, of course, we want an robust mobile site. If I'm remembering the numbers right, at least 60% of people who use our website are doing so from a mobile device. We'd like it to be more attractive. It's just time for an update. And I have always felt that there's a lot of empty real estate, beachfront real estate on our homepage. The website should meet current accessibility standards. One of the things that is going to be time-consuming about the redevelopment process is adding missing content. And that may be where some of those processes we're talking about and trying to map out can end up on our future website. We also plan to bring the Rehoboth Beach Patrol website under the city's website. Currently, they have a separate site. We are going to, the new website needs to integrate the Civic Web. We're going to maintain that, keep that, and integrate it into the new site. And I'd also like to find a way to integrate Reach Out Rehoboth. Maybe it's a feed that shows some of the project pages from that site. But we'll have to figure out how best to do that. So I just wanted to pause for a minute. I don't know if we want to talk about goals before I talk about two of the proposals we've received. Well, if you have additional comments later, you know where to find me.
You already hit on my favorite one, Lynn, which is to integrate Reach Out.
Okay.
Because Commissioner Chernowski just mentioned Reach Out as an aid for us to help with our committee work as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as we start to integrate things, that makes perfect sense.
One question I did have under content, you'd mentioned about bringing the Beach Patrol site into ours. Now, the bandstand has a very robust site, what have you. Is there any discussion about letting it stand alone or bringing it as part of?
There was absolutely discussion.
Okay.
And we landed on leaving the bandstand as a separate site at this point. It's a attractive, well-functioning. Corey has it doing what he needs it to do, so we were going to leave it alone.
Agreed.
The adage was, don't take off more than your ability to chew right now, and if it's functioning well, let's leave it alone until a later date.
Yeah. And maybe this isn't exact the subject, but I know there has been discussion, again, of going into a .gov website address. Is that at all?
That is in progress. Our application has moved from pending to the approval process. So that will be a seamless integration on the back end. We won't even know it. We email addresses will just transition to .gov. There'll be two sites mirrored side by side, and they'll be interchangeable. So actually, the .com will be interchangeable with .gov. So the public will be no idea that it's even going on.
Great, thank you.
Lynn, just one question. Under
Yes.
the content section,
Mhm.
where you use the example, for example, how-to guides to obtain various permits, are you thinking along the lines that we could have all sorts of how-to guides?
Yes.
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 Because I'm remembering we had talked at one time, the commissioners did, I think, when we were passing the tree code, of a how-to guide, a very friendly how-to guide for trees. I don't know if we ever did that, but it would lend itself.
Right. And if you have other topics that you'd like for a how-to guide, please
Right.
let me know. So I noted that one.
Yeah.
That was actually the genesis of the idea as we move forward, having a very similar format for all the how-to guides. And you put the application, and here's the how-to, and how it makes sense. It's just a
Well,
natural.
what's great to hear is some of the breadcrumbs that we've dropped along the way are finally coming to fruition, which I think is great movement and great progress. So I'm all for it at this point.
And I'm sorry, one other question. You've got under design, the fourth point, site utilizes a defined visual style guide. Does the city have its own style guide from the standpoint of logos, fonts, colors, anything of that nature that would parallel this?
We don't have an official guide. There are official colors that I use. You see them in lines in the sand. They are taken from the logo, but not an official guide.
Okay.
I think, doesn't one of the two, no, both of them actually help you define what that process is at some level. They help you put those definitions in place or put those guidelines in place.
Yeah, again, just for a look of consistency so that when you see a document, you know it's City of Rehoboth Beach. So, thank you.
So over the past several months, we have spent a lot of time reaching out and talking with website vendors. Most of the time, we have had multiple meetings. I have met with them, the IT director, as well as the city manager and assistant city manager when they have been available. So we have quotes or proposals from 5 companies. We have 6 different proposals because one company has 2 web-based products. And there are 2 that we would like to talk with you about today. And one is a Granicus product called Open Cities. And it is a newish concept for doing websites. The idea is that they are flexible and simplified and accessible websites. And Oro Valley is one example of that website. And you can see the simplicity of the website, and the idea is that these boxes are some of the most popular, based on data, the most popular pages or information that people are looking for. And then the city of Clearwater also uses Open Cities. As does Orlando. In fact, Orlando was apparently the first city in the US to go with an Open Cities website. And the city of Charlotte also has one, although they have highly customized it. So the positives about Open Cities sites are that they meet the highest accessibility standards. They are flexible. You can change the homepage. Oftentimes, or all the time in my experience, once you have established your homepage template, the format, you can't go in and change the color or the order of things. With an Open Cities website, you can do that. It's a Granicus product, as is Reach Out Rehoboth. So there are some built-ins, like if you do a search on the website, it will pull Reach Out Rehoboth topics and words and refer people to that page. And then Max is really excited that APIs provides for API automation and integration. I don't even know what that means, but Max does. Some of the cons about this website. I think they focus on function sometimes to the detriment of aesthetics and design. Also, in talking with cities that have used this platform, some of the most successful ones have large IT departments, and it does take apparently some IT assistance on the back end. And I have
Not just IT design, right? It's also web design.
You're right.
So it's both
web developers.
the technical expertise in the back end, but also the front end, the aesthetics for the web design to help, really pull that website along. So that is, in my mind, a difficult pill to swallow since we don't have that capability in the city.
Right. I'm not sure that if we went this platform, we would be able, I think we would end up perhaps at the basics of this because we don't have web developers, dedicated web developers on staff.
So Lynn, let me just cut to the chase on that.
Yes,
Does
ma'am.
that make this proposal a a deal breaker?
It is not the one that I recommend.
Okay. You know, I just like the bottom line, so I'm sorry for that, but
No,
it
I
sounded,
appreciate that.
as you were describing it, it sounded like a deal breaker.
Okay. The other website provider that I'd like to talk with you about today is called Planetaria. They are a small and growing company outside of California. I came across them on a government social media Facebook group, and people were talking highly of their experience with Planetaria. So we reached out to them. And here, let me just show you a couple of their websites. Clackamas County is one. They have those guides. The city of Vancouver, Washington is another that used Planetaria. The Molina Housing Authority. So what is attractive to us about Planetaria is that their websites are built to order. They are very customized. There is flexibility and relative ease of use of the content management system because it is built on a WordPress system. My favorite thing about Planetaria is that they were the only company that asked us what we wanted in our website. They didn't try to sell us their product as was. They wanted to know what we wanted. The bad news about Planetaria is that they come in at a higher price. And they have admittedly had some growing pains recently, and there's been some less satisfaction among their recent customers. And I spoke with folks at Planetaria about that, and they shared with me what they have been doing to address those issues. The Open Cities proposal is $35,300 plus $6,300 for the annual license. The Planetaria proposal is $55,900 plus $7,000 for the annual licenses. So again, my recommendation would be to go with Planetaria and to custom build a website for the city of Rehoboth Beach. It would require additional funding in next year's budget.
Lynn, you talked briefly about some pain points within one website design company. Were there pain points in the Granicus as well?
Absolutely. Granicus is a huge company. It serves hundreds of cities with websites, and there was feedback with concerns about Granicus's customer service. Again, the ease of use of the back end for the Open Cities product.
I mean, to me, the proposal that Planetaria was very enriched. It was very.
It's a wow.
They took a lot of time to put into this. Just a technical question, if you can answer. It's like on the costs, the Grancius is $6,300 for annual license, and then the phrase used for the other proposal is $7,080 for annual maintenance and hosting. Are those the same thing in essence?
They are.
Okay,
Different terms, same thing.
got it.
And the plus is there, because Granicus did provide, I believe it's a 5% increase per year. I did not get future years from Planetaria.
But one of the questions that Lynn also did ask, Reach Out Rehoboth, compatibility with both sites. I mean, there is a pull for both of them because that was part of the design criteria, right?
Right. I specifically got back to Planetaria because I knew that was a plus of the Granicus site, at least in the search function. And so Planetaria knows that integration of Reach Out Rehoboth is one of our primary goals.
I guess a question for, of concern, and it parallels this in the sense of these two proposals, you are in more approving planetary in that regard, as I kind of hear what you're saying. But from a resource aspect of our staffing, are we currently resourced properly to maintain, to develop and maintain and implement either one of these or any website from where we are to where we need to be?
It would be a stretch on Lynn's capabilities moving forward, is my opinion. I don't know if Evan wants to weigh in on this one as well, but that was one of the reasons why I put a part-time communications specialist focused on social media and website on her organizational chart for the next year, because I think that's critical as the city moves forward, to have someone who's focused on that media communication across all spectrums. And I think this would be a good time to relook at that one for the next year's budget. But alone, she would be stretched. With an assistant, I think she could definitely take this on.
Well, that's almost inevitable, that we're going to need to put more focus on things that we're not currently doing, and we've not upgraded to keep up with where we should be. So to me, it's an inevitability.
But I just want to make that clear that these are going to need to go hand in hand to be successful.
Absolutely.
To update this in the
And I
sense.
think, as you are so interested in community engagement, there's a lot of communications happening and being juggled, which is great. A website is a time-consuming project. I do think that we can move forward. I think we may be moving forward a little more slowly than ideally we could.
And paralleling this, has the current process of updating the website fallen to, whether it be individuals or departments, heads, or what have you, are we also looking at updating that line of responsibility to keep the website accurate and updated, as falling into departments or falling into communications? Or because again, if in doing this, I think that we need to be able to manage the product. I'm not saying we're not doing it now, but this seems to be a little more robust than what we currently have, and to carry that through.
My hope would be that we could engage our departments more. Right now, most updates happen if I or IT gets the information that something needs to be updated. For our parking department, for example, is very proactive in having information updated and providing that to me. I would hope that we could spread that across departments. I like the idea of there being a central manager of the information, a gatekeeper, if you will. That is how I've functioned in previous communities. So that the answer, the hope is that we can spread responsibility for keeping the website up to date among our departments.
And to force the integration of all the software systems we currently have. iCompass Diligent, the one that our legislative portal is on, that will be a fully integrated aspect within our base, the new website, whichever one you go to, because that was part of the design criteria that Lynn put together. You have to have that push capability of the other IT platforms into the website, because otherwise then you're adding more steps. And so it has to be seamless. It has to be already in there. So Ann would be updating a legislative portal, which would automatically push into the website. So those different components, I think, would definitely be helpful. Right now, we're going to 2 different calendars and managing 2. We should be just managing 1. So.
Right.
Sort of leading off that question, do either of these sites, or maybe it is separate in that, have the capacity to eventually go into a staff intranet?
Planetary, I thought.
Planetaria, for sure,
Yeah.
we could. I don't know about Open Cities. I would imagine that's probably a possibility.
I think that is a new way for communities to go. Joe, do you have any tie-ins of that one, or any information? No, okay.
Just something in the future. Thank you.
So for the purposes of today, you're just wanting from us an approval to move forward with your recommendation of planetarium.
I would love that.
So how do we get there? Mayor?
Well,
Consensus.
I'm thinking that we need to vote on this at the
Add this to the agenda for the next,
October regular meeting.
because it will need a.
This is quite an expense, and I think we need to go in it with our
So
eyes
do we
open.
need a contract draft, which I do not have yet?
Yeah, can you grab Tyler and get a full contract so we
yes.
can, as that as an additional one? Because you also need to delineate what was approved by the Board of Commissioners in April versus what we're asking for, what the difference is. So,
Okay.
yeah, and that's really what we're asking for the differences.
So one final question from me, Lynn. If this were to move forward at our regular meeting, then what's your hope for a timeline?
So I would,
Giving yourself a
sure,
wide berth.
I need to do that. I really want to be able to begin, and if you approve it in October, I'm hoping we can begin November, December. There will be a lot of user experience, analytics going on at the front end, and then design concepts. So I would say we're probably 12 to 18 months from a launch.
Okay.
But we would have continuity of our website and portal through the whole development time.
I'm sorry,
We
ma'am.
would have continuity of use
yes.
of the website and the portal during that whole development process.
Yes, that would.
Any questions from up here?
None?
Any questions from members of the public? Nope. Thank you very much, Lynn. We appreciate all the work you've done on this.
Thank you, Lynn.
Joe, put that air media back up, please. All right, our next item of new business, D, is status update on Sister Cities Fountain Project at Garden of the Navigators. Before we get to the presentation embedded in the agenda, Commissioner Markert wanted to give a preview or something, is that right?
Okay. I just wanted to, we have some new members on the commission, and I guess for the public. I happen to be a board member of the Rehoboth Beach Sister Cities Association, which was formed, I think, in 2010, thereabouts. And from that point on, it was something that was sort of came out of the State Secretary of State's office in order to have sister cities, which sort of engender benefits between our city and another city, which is a lovely a town in Italy called Greve in Chianti, and I highly recommend you visit. And there happens to be a garden dedicated to Rehoboth Beach there, as there is a garden dedicated to Greve in our city. And I just wanted to give just a brief rundown about the garden. There's other things that we're involved with regard to a meeting with the people in Greve, and we've had some artist exchanges and various things. Pat Caluzzi can talk about that if you like. But we began the garden. The garden kind of got started, I want to say somewhere around 2013, and the construction took about 2 years. I mean, it was largely done in 2013, but then but there was some additional things that happened. But after it was all said and done, we basically gifted the garden to the city. The value of that at the time was about $80,700. And what we're looking to do now, which was something that was approved back in, I think, in 2018, was to make an addition to the garden with a fountain that was actually made nearby in Grave and basically donated to us. We had to pay the fees to get it here. It's here now. It arrived this year about in April, the beginning of April. And the cost so far for that sort of extension of the project is about $3,500. So we have gotten, I think, through the city some estimates as to installing it and to do some additional landscaping and so forth. And I think we just want to kind of bring you up to date as far as that goes. I didn't know if you wanted to make additional comments or whatever. And yeah.
Funky, I have a clarification on something you just said.
Yeah.
Did you say, or who paid to get the fountain transported here?
We did.
Who is we?
The Rehoboth Beach Sister Cities Association.
Cities. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Introduce yourself and your guests too,
I
if you would.
will. I'm Pat Calusi, 41 Sussex Street, resident here in Rehoboth Beach. And this is Mary Jane Dietz, board member, Rehoboth Beach Sister Cities Association. She's our secretary. I'm the president of the association. And I do want to, before I get started, is thank Lawrence and Liz for doing such a great job of getting the garden in shape. When we had visitors from Italy, our sister city here, and it really looked good. And we had a wonderful reception, and so thanks again for that. So if you could, this part right here, just magnify here. Good. I've gotten the, and as well, you have the estimates from Sposato to do this work. It's our intention to pay for the installation of the fountain and the irrigation part of it as well. The one thing that we are very concerned about is the cost of what the softscape would be. And we're looking for alternatives to that. I don't know. It's a lot of plants for this section here. We are thinking that we really don't need to go the distance with that, and I'm hoping we can potentially look for other avenues for doing that, either with some of our volunteers from sister cities, or I've talked with Rehoboth and Bloom of maybe getting them involved. But the Sposato estimate of $5,700, almost $5,800 for those plantings just seems to be a lot. And so it's not something that right now in our budget that we can afford. So I'm hopeful that we can come up with some other idea. I mean, maybe you have other ideas, or maybe we can just utilize Sposato to take out a couple of things. So what I've done is I've taken some photographs, and I'll show you those, and just the idea of what I think would be simplify what we need to do. So this is right off of the compass. There's the bench there, and behind it, this is Russian sage, and behind that are grasses. I believe if we just pull all of that out of there, and then the fountain would be in that same area. That's Tom. That's Mary Jane's husband being the fountain, approximate height of it. So we would be thinking that we would be putting that right there. Oh, sorry. So that's the view from the compass. Then we have a view, if you walk into the entrance from Olive Avenue, okay, looking that way, that's where the fountain would be. And the proposal would be for us to take those plantings out and have the fountain located, which I believe is approximately where it is here right now. And then the plantings could be then added a little bit later. So just the mulching in that area and plantings for later. So anybody have questions, comments, thoughts? Liz?
I do. Thank you for showing this to us, Pat. Had you been here for some of the library meetings, you would understand my question. And the commissioners are going to understand it, I think.
Okay.
I think you just said it's y'all's intention to pay for installation and irrigation. Did I catch that?
No, it's not an intention. We are paying for it. Oh, we
Okay.
intend to, but yes, we are paying for it.
Okay, that was the clarification I had to pull out of the library. Is it your intention or is it your guarantee?
It's our guarantee.
Thank you. Thank you. That's not directed at y'all. It's from a previous
Okay,
episode.
sure.
And so I'm a little confused on, you talked about the placement of the fountain.
Mm-hmm.
Is this footprint for Navigators Park, is it bigger now than it is? Well, would it be larger with the fountain than it is today?
So you may remember, or may not.
I bet I do.
Back in the day,
Yeah.
we talked about enlarging it a little bit just to accommodate the fountain. With this proposal, I don't think we're going to be really enlarging it so much as just putting the fountain where the current grasses and Russian sage are. So if it's enlarged, it would be by, very insignificant amount. I mean, as you know, we would like to do a lot more at some point, but currently
I do recall that.
Yes.
A question for you with regards to the Sposato proposal.
Yes.
So how did that originate? I mean, where did you just say we want to put a fountain in and make it pretty, or was Liz involved at all in selecting the picture frame of this, or how did we get?
Well, how it all came together originally was we had the person who designed the landscape. We had a landscape architect who worked with us here and also with the folks in Greve, Italy, did their design. And so there was a much larger idea initially, which is I've just put up here. So then we took this and moved it back to not really enlarging the garden so much. And that was the landscape architect who did that, then got passed on to Liz and to Sposato. And they came up with the latest one, which shows the plantings that I think you have, that I just showed. But that's
Sorry,
where it came from.
Liz and Sposato came up with? Okay.
The plantings themselves.
Okay.
So they kind of took what Ray, the landscape architect, put together and came up with this idea of what plantings could be there. But the $5,700, almost $5,800 for the plantings and the labor, obviously, was just it was more than we could really afford at this time. So we're looking for some alternative to this. Are there other questions?
Thank you. Well, I think one question Lawrence has resolved about installation fees. And did you want to take it from there?
I think the installation fees, I think Pat spoke about that one specifically. We spoke many months ago about the installation of the fountain based off of when it was delivered for the dedication ceremony. I wanted Liz to work with our engineer at Beacon Engineering, make sure that's the right spot for it. And he did. He came out there. Liz, you might want to just pop up and just make sure, correct me if I'm wrong on any specific. It'll walk through the area, make sure utilities are in the right spot. They can be run there, water, lights, make sure it's the right pad location. So when we do pour the concrete, we're not going to inadvertently do something that's going to cost us down the line. And so that was all done. And I think that full installation fee covers everything I just talked about. Okay, so yeah, she's giving me the head and the thumbs up. And that was Yeah, and that's really was my biggest concern is, once we find a location, is it engineering the right place to do it?
So Lawrence, who can answer for me, what's the bottom line cost to the city, to the taxpayers? Just give me the bottom line. I don't like 500 pages of,
Well, it was going to be just shy of $5,800.
1,500.
No, just shy of $5,800.
58.
We would.
Oh,
end
that's
up-
the Sposado.
Yeah, we would do the entire bill of $9,000, and they would pay us back for the installation, and then the $5,782 was for the softscape, the plantings, making it sure it looks, aesthetically pleasing, but also in line with what's currently out there.
And that's a maximum.
Yeah.
You're talking
Yeah.
about scaling that.
Yeah, because they said
scaling that
they really can't afford that $5,700. So that's why it was brought in this presentation, because of the limitations of the Sister Cities Association to not be able to absorb that $5,800. But they're asking to not waive this, or to waive this one now and do it in kind. I'm trying to piece it together. So.
Well, it was never clear to me what the city was offering at this point, so I was trying to come up with other solutions. Yes, we would love it if the city would be responsible for the plantings there, not something that we would be responsible for. We're certainly, as I say, we will guarantee paying for the installation of the, just so long as, I think that's a firm cost. I'm assuming, based on the two things I saw, was the pouring the foundation, or the pad, if you will, the electric and the irrigation and all that hookup. That's, we are prepared, that's what, 38, 33, and something like $580 for the rest.
Yeah.
That's what we are able to pay. And so if the city was not going to be able to do plantings for us, then we were going to look for some other alternative.
Okay. Yeah, I think I jumped ahead and started stepping on Liz's toes here, because she didn't get a chance to do her full briefing. So, yeah.
Okay, because I want to hear from Liz.
Yes.
Because something my parents taught me a long time ago, there is no such thing as a free gift. I don't know if you've heard that, but we've been burned already with some other projects around town. So it's less about this project and learning from how we've had some hiccups around town before.
All right, so let me move this back. So you guys saw a couple of different designs, the original and then a modified, and then the design Sposado did recently. I did not provide them with the previous two designs because I wanted it to be fresh, because we have had a lot of changes in that area. If you think back to 2018, when this was originally conceived, the fountain, we had the whole streetscape and all that landscaping. So it's very important that the new landscaping tie in Lake Avenue Phase 2 with the Navigators Park, so that there's continuity there. So if you had your plants memorized, you would see that a few of them are repeated in the new landscape plan, like the ornamental onions. And keep in mind that 5,000, probably half is just the labor to dig out and remove everything there in the way, which is pretty labor intensive. So even if we removed replanting altogether, you're still looking at, 8,000-ish without any new plants, which I think would be a disservice to what the garden currently looks like, because it's probably one of our prettiest ones we have throughout town. And you can't help but to work there and have anybody who walks by compliment the city on how nice it looks. So I think if the option is, if the commissioners want to move forward with installing the fountain that was decided 5 years ago, we and sister cities cannot afford to replant the city will have no other option but to do it ourselves and fund that extra $5,000. In terms of ongoing cost, and I wrote it in the briefing, we have about an additional $200 a year. It'll be $100, and that's under an existing contract. They just gave me a verbal quote that it would be about $100 a year to start it up and $100 a year to drain it and close it out. And that's while they're there starting up and turning off our existing irrigation. So keep that in mind, that if we had somebody come just to do the fountain, you'd probably see that number closer to 500 would be my guess. In terms of cleaning, that's a big question mark for me. The fountain is currently being stored at the streets department, and it is not a fake terracotta. It is a real artisan piece with real terracotta that has a texture to it. And hopefully sister cities can reach out to the artist and get us some further instructions on maintenance and cleaning. They may already have them, because I highly doubt it can be power washed, and I'm envisioning it being, after years of working for a pond maintenance and fountain maintenance company, I can envision it being covered in algae and having to scrub it once a week or hire Envirotech to do so. So at this point, the ongoing cost, besides that $200, if we have to have a contractor to come in and take care of the water and scrub it, we could be looking at a couple $1,000 a year. And then I would say whatever to make note of what Lawrence said, we did have Bob Palmer with Beacon come out, and if you read his attached email, he had no issue in terms of location for utilities. His one recommendation is that it be put on a separate breaker so that if it trips, it doesn't trip the irrigation and lighting, but given that gets checked once a month by me and once a month by Spazzato, the irrigation and lighting will know that it's tripped. It's not something major that I think warrants the extra cost for the electric Apple or whoever to come and do it. But the water itself will be put on a separate trigger. A lot of times you can tie it into the irrigation, but that leads to the burnout of the pump. So we did have that price to do separately. And those fountain pumps do not last long, 3 years usually. And I'd say they're about $300. So that's another thing to factor in.
And do we know, will the fountain run 24 hours a day?
I imagine we can put it on a timer, but I think, yes, it would originally. But now, I mean, I don't know what's common. I'll have to ask. Spazzato does a lot of fountains, thankfully, because this was I've never had a fountain installed before, so this is a new one for me. But I know that timers, if you have to get one of those, are like 25.
I'm curious if that's even been considered. But
Nope, it hasn't.
In the report from our consulting engineer, it talks about the fountain, if the fountain is fitted with an automatic filling system. Do we know, is that for water? Is that?
Yeah, so that's kind of what he was talking about is, so those can be tied. So like sometimes they do them so that every time the irrigation comes on, it fills up. Sometimes they do them separately. I have it priced to do separately because ultimately you'll have more problems if they're together.
Right. So when you say automatic filling, and that's kind of like the analogy I've seen used is like a bathroom or a toilet plunger valve thing.
Triggered by like a float. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You're asking all the same questions I had when I inherited this project because I didn't know either.
I've had experience with fountain before. So.
Lucky you.
I know when I walk in front of Pat Galuzzi's house, I hear water running, because she has some kind of fountain there. So I don't imagine this would be so loud that our neighbors would complain.
Well, there's nobody super close, and if anything, they're used as white noise. So it's an interesting thing to think about it running 24/7 because it does get super quiet at night. And I don't know if we need that white noise, but we can play with that if need be.
And I recall there were mention of lights or lighting in there.
If the fountain is fitted with a lighting system, the lighting system should also be powered from a dedicated fountain pump outlet.
So are you planning on lights?
No, we did not include it. can be done at a cost, but we did not include that in there. But we have an existing lighting set up there.
Just timing on this, from the standpoint, it needs to be winterized, if you will, drained and covered or what have you. So is this installation scheduled for now or the spring or?
It's not scheduled at all because we don't have
Well, but
the
I mean,
okay to do so.
It would seem kind of,
We're borderline, honestly, in terms of when you want to do planting and stuff. Like Sposato likes to have there's a lot of like southern species, grasses and say crepe myrtles and stuff that have to be planted. I mean, it's a little bit weather dependent, but they like them done before Thanksgiving. So I have a couple other projects that are in the same mode that they can start them now, right? Have it look complete, but still have maybe if there's, I don't know, when like say the onions might have to be planted in the spring. But that's a normal thing for Sposato to do, is to phase it out. But I think we're getting tight on timeline to do that this year, and because we're coordinating multiple subcontractors for this.
Can I make a comment? Just from a perspective of the fountain, having it done in the spring would be fine with us. I mean, we just want it done by Verrazano Day, which is April 17th, because it's the big 500-year anniversary. So we want to be able to show them that this is.
And where did you say the fountain is now?
It is stored over at the streets department inside their building in boxes covered in straw.
So when it has to be moved, let's say it's been installed for the purposes of this discussion. When it has to be moved, will it go right back to where it is? With the
It stays there.
It doesn't get disassembled.
So during the hard winter, it will be in the Park of the Navigators? And there's going to be no problem with that?
I'm sensing a question mark.
A big question mark.
In terms of,
Well, do we need to put a cover over it to keep water out? Because water might freeze in it depending upon the piping system.
And leak.
And the drain.
So, yeah, it would be drained. Typically, you could cover with, some sort of plastic, or they do wood, or there's ways of doing it. And I can get that information from the man who made the fountain.
And would the expectation be that would be on the city?
Yeah, yes.
The slide up here responds to a couple questions. I didn't know I had control of the machine.
Yeah, I read that about the salt water does not appear or will not have any impact on it.
we're pretty, I mean, you can still see the effects of salt on plants a mile inland, but we're far enough that I wouldn't worry about it. It's not, oceanfront.
I'd just like to make two comments. Let me enlarge this on the screen a little bit. I just want to read it for those of us that haven't seen this slide in a while. Areas A, B, and C, I think and D were playground or picnic areas, and then these were picnic tables with verandas over them. And I would just want to reinforce that has nothing to do with this project. Those were past designs that were rejected at the time, if you will. So I have a question on exactly where the fountains is going to be installed, because this drawing here's Olive Avenue here, and here's 3rd Street up here. It shows it, the fountain right here. When I was there with the Sister Cities group, Enzo Zago, he's the designer. He showed me that the fountain was going up here. Can you see the screen? See the screen? So is this an accurate? This is accurate.
Semi,
okay,
yeah, scroll
okay.
to the current
It just surprised
design.
me because he indicated it might take out that last one.
Yeah, the current design has it situated. And we went through a couple of different scenarios with Spizzato, but ultimately we wanted a location that when people walked by on the sidewalk, they could see it. And if they went and sat on the benches, it wouldn't be, literally splashing them on the back or something like that, so that it was obvious but not in your face.
Very good. Any other questions up here?
Just to confirm, if I may, is the note from Robert Palmer with these 4 points, have those all been made part of this $3,800?
I'm not
It's
sure. I know
talking
what you
about
mean.
relocation of the irrigation
Yes.
system, irrigation pump, dedicated 20 amp circuit, fitted with a lighting system if it is, and fitted with an automatic filling system. So
We addressed all of them, but we're not going to do a dedicated circuit because after discussing it with Apple Electric, who's actually been down there recently because we had to have a new breaker put in.
Okay.
We decided it wasn't worth the cost, and that's why I said we're out there twice a month to inspect those so that if something trips, it's very obvious.
Okay. So that 3,800 is including everything over there except that circuit?
The cost to relocate the irrigation under our existing contract is another like 500.
Okay. So the question I hear then is this question that Sister Cities is not able to support the softscape of estimated 57, but Pat, you said you were looking at like Rehoboth and Bloom for volunteers perhaps, or?
That was an option if the city was not able to put it in their Spizzato, contract to do that kind of work. then
Okay.
We would consider, contacting them.
And half of that, you're saying, Liz, is labor probably?
Probably more than half. Probably half is just removing what's there. I
Okay.
mean, digging out all those different plants and then not destroying the irrigation will not be an easy task.
So maybe like $4,000 of the 57?
Yeah, probably is the labor to remove and plant and everything, and then the remainder would be the cost of the plants, because there's not a ton of plants going in.
Right. Okay.
So Liz, are you expecting,
Pat, step up to the microphone if you would, or either one, yeah.
are you expecting more than just the grasses and the Russian sage to be removed? There was something about cutting down a tree, and I was going to mention that to you, that do we have to do that?
Yes. Well, number one, when we had that snowstorm, what was it, a year or two ago, every single one of those three little cypresses fell apart.
Yeah.
And I went and cut a ladder and tied them all back together, and they've done okay. But it's just another 3 inches of snow from falling apart again. And it's actually you won't be able to see the fountain if it doesn't get removed.
Okay.
And then you won't have any symmetry. So
Okay.
it was kind of one of those,
I was just looking for ways to, potentially cut the cost there.
I mean,
So
that-
it's those,
it's
just the,
digging.
those trees and the Russian sage and the,
I can tell you, it's the digging out of all those, that is very labor. Having done it in my own yard multiple times, it's very labor intensive.
okay.
So,
Especially with the utilities all right there.
yeah, because we have all the lights, the underground irrigation, all that good stuff.
Well, this was brought back to us because I think when we first entertained this recently, I think some of us heard that the city was paying for the installation, that the delivery was free, but the city would pay for all the installation. That's why you've seen we've done our research that says sister cities will pay for the installation and the delivery, and the city will then own, quote unquote, own the fountain and therefore be responsible for the maintenance. So, Tony, I think you're exactly right. Nothing's free. But what are the costs? Lawrence, what more do you need from us today?
Really, the direction on this one, if we're going to make this an enhancement to the Garden of Navigators, it has to be done, full scope, I believe. And I think Liz has a good plan in place right now. Sister City Association can handle the portion they said they can. So now we're in a portion, a conundrum basically to how to move forward. Do we move forward with the full scope of the $5,800, or do we minimize the cost? I'm not a fan of marginalizing this level of installation because I think you'll end up having a very large gap right there where we put the new fountain in place. I'm cautionary about having the volunteers do it because Spazzato knows what those lines are. I'm really hesitant to have Rehoboth and Blooming come in there and just start digging and pulling out there because I think we may end up causing more problems than we would solve.
Well, and then
Well,
even,
I'm very comfortable with Spazzato because we've been using them for consistency. They kind of own that whole area there. So I'd rather go with, I believe their full-blown design and maybe split the costs. That I would think would be, you would be happy with that.
We'll have to do a little fundraising.
well, maybe another option is we can hold off until the spring if that gives them more time. I don't know how their funding works, but that could be another potential.
So it seems to me that perhaps pouring the foundation for the fountain or the pad, getting everything ready might make some sense, and then do the fountain install in the spring. Would that make sense to you or not?
I'd rather not do half of I'd rather have the funding and the approved plan in place for the whole project so that whether or not that means we have all 10,500 available and we pour the pad and get everything in place now and do the full install in the spring, or whether we do 90% now and the final couple of plants in the spring. But I don't think it makes sense to have partial funding in place.
Well, we could come up with perhaps if you can front end some of the plantings now, and then we can pay for the rest in the spring, perhaps, might be a solution.
Yeah, and the reason we're back here, right, is because the approved minutes from 2018 had a certain location design approved and a certain payment. So that necessitated us coming back here if the city is going to tweak the design, just a small alteration, and pay for any of this.
All right. Let's pause a minute. We'll go to members of the public. Walter?
Joe, it might be helpful if we could scroll to the actual site plan. Oh, do you want to use the podium?
What is the actual site plan?
It's part of that. It's part of the packet.
This whole thing?
It is 134 or 138, Mayor.
If you want to just do the overhead, it'll work.
Far right, stand, no, yeah, click on those, that'll take you up and down.
Good afternoon, Walter Brittingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. I'm not trying to be smart, but I see too many people up here not saying anything. This is how the lifeguard facility turned out. I keep hearing about Apple. They work for free. Spazzato, we just add that to the contract. I've heard about the pad. I read the engineering report, which was very well done. I'm still waiting for the kayaks at the dock. And nobody wanted to talk about that. I hear about possibility of having the fountains turn off at night. Now it sounds to me like we're going to add some timers up there. Quite frankly, not to deviate, because it's part of the discussion at the triangle as you come out in front of the Kenny Lingo House at Mariners Park. When you come back onto Lake Avenue, we don't even trim the grass down so you can see. When you come in on State Road at what I call Mare Mills Park out there, when you're coming around from Rehoboth Elementary School and look over to the left, you can't see the cars coming in at high speed coming in on State Road. And y'all, no, too many of you are, in my opinion, right now. Oh, by the way, Liz only has one person. And we still don't have the tree at Shaw Park, the Grove, whatever you want to call it, that's growing out over the street that was reported building and licensing. Liz is too busy, only has one person, and we can't get things taken care of now, and you're going to add to this park. And this park is right down there behind all the cars that park as a result of that streetscape project. So I go back and say, remember the dock. I haven't heard about this fountain beforehand, and I won't say you all, but there's too many of you that know about it, but I don't remember hearing the public hearing about it. So we do need this new web page, and I think you're jumping into something else that's just going to be more money. You're looking at storm drain projects and stuff like that, and we don't even take care of what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we're committed to receiving this, and we have certain obligations as the owner of it. What should have been clarified back then is all the costs probably, and we didn't. So now we're at the point where we're receiving it and trying to figure out how to get it done and who pays for what. So we appreciate y'all coming in, spending the whole morning here with us. And back to this, we'll give feedback. Do we want to contribute the entire $5,800 for Sposata to do this? Would you be comfortable splitting it in half with the sister cities groups as I proposed, so that we can certainly take this to a vote at our October regular meeting if we don't get a consensus today? Commissioner?
Just for clarification, I was reading through, but do we know the value of the fountain?
Is there a value, dollar value,
If we were to
American
buy it,
dollar,
what it would
American
cost?
dollar on?
$8,000 and $10,000? Okay.
Francis, you want to? Oh, they might need that for our insurance things. Francis, go ahead.
Hi, Francis Kelleher, resident. Having been a gardener, doing all my own yard work forever, that price is absurd. If that was my fountain and yard, I think there's other approaches. Unless we're going to transplant the grasses, then they don't actually really need to be dug out. They could be just pruned and chopped to the ground. By the time the installation with the concrete pad and all that is done, they're gonna kill probably most of those plants. They're gonna be buried. It makes a lot, if it was me, I would simply take my pruner, cut all those grasses down, unless you want to transplant them, in which case I would dig them out, but I haven't heard anybody say anything about transplanting them. But they could be dug out and then saved and replanted. But if we're not going to do that, then just cut them to the ground, do the installation, then wait until the spring, and then you could do some plantings. The cost is absurd. $55,700, that's absurd. And in the meantime, the ladies could even be tic-tacking with the Rehoboth in Bloom and others, and it could be, again, you see what you have and then what you need to plant to fill around the fountain, or what, one thing I didn't get from, and I looked at it before the meeting, people want to kind of go up to the fountain. I didn't know if there, was going to be like area to walk around the fountain, and then that could dictate, what needs to go further out. But I really think you could do, I'll call it a minimalistic approach. Right now, no money for the planting, a simple cut down, let the installation go ahead, and see then in the spring what would need to be done. And then price that out, but to pay Spazzato $5,700, I think is truly a waste of taxpayer money. Really absurd.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Well, again, I would be agreeable to splitting the cost or whatever, but with the recognition that we could go to Spazzato and see if there's anything different they could do that's a little cheaper. Again, I'm a fan of them, so to speak, for the areas that they control. I think that if we expand those areas, that they ought to be the ones that continue to maintain those areas. Is there any further comment up here?
I can support a split. I'm a little confused as to, but I think I'm trying to think it out. That would put us into the spring for an installation.
I think it all depends on when we get a final approval and what we're actually approved to do, and then talking it out with Spazzato. So I would like to have it done this year, this fall. But given that we're kind of up against the clock, I'm just not sure I can promise that until we have a signed, ready to go thing for them.
Well, do you think we could put this on the October regular meeting agenda for a vote and have more details and be able to finalize costs and cost share?
We absolutely can. I think the topic and the subject and the motion would be to adjust the 2018 decision for the floor plan, split the cost between the sister cities for the beautification and not the installation. They would absorb the full installation cost, and the city and sister cities would split. So there'd be a motion with those two items as such, if that was amenable to the board. And I think Commissioner...
I'd like to go that route. In other words, within the next 2-ish weeks, we should be able to resolve this and get it off our plate.
But just help me through this here. As I understand it, this 5,700, 4,000 of that is labor to...
It's a guess,
a figure,
35,
okay, a figure. A portion of that,
Mhm.
that labor has to take place in order to clear a space to put the pad in, to put the fountain in?
Yeah.
So there's got to be money expended before you can install the damn thing.
Yeah, there's no way we can cut things to the ground and just hope they don't grow back as weeds and then have them rot and decay underneath a brand new concrete foundation supporting goodness knows how much. I mean, it took 3 guys just to lift one layer, the bottom layer of that fountain. Then we have 3 layers. I think it has like little finial on the top and the water and the pump. So it's got to be like a reinforced concrete pad.
But again, if we seek to try to resolve this by the October regular meeting, I thought, Pat, I heard you say a little more time for fundraising would be beneficial, and therefore we would be pushing this out till spring.
So if step 1 could be go back to Spazzato about perhaps looking at that cost again, we're looking at, then our share is probably what, 2,900? So I'd like to see that lower. And what we would do is try to make up the difference that we would need to make up as far as splitting it with the city for the plantings. But what you're saying then is, or what you were saying is then we would be waiting till spring. And for me, it's really, really important that it be installed by April 17th. That's for me. And I think it might be hard, wouldn't it, in the spring? Because of
Yeah,
weather.
I mean, that way we're kind of in between 2 fiscal years. Weather can always be iffy. The earliest we normally start doing landscaping is March for like plantings and stuff. So that could be a little questionable in my mind.
I mean, I'm willing to make a commitment up to a certain amount. We can write the check, for example, for the installation of the fountain and the irrigation, and make a commitment for the rest to be paid to you in January timeframe, something like that, if that's amenable.
Anybody?
If we could see that proposal in writing, that would be great.
Well, I think, do we just need to sign off on what's here? As far as the irrigation and the installation?
I think it should probably be like a memo between sister cities and the
Okay.
city of Rehoboth on what,
No,
who's going
I'm
to cover
sorry, I
what.
meant the other fundraising efforts from your
Oh,
part
okay,
to commit to that.
okay. We
Yeah,
can do
that's what I
that.
said, a
That's-
memo that you've donated the fountain with an estimated value of this, you're gonna contribute X to the install, the city will be responsible for all ongoing maintenance.
Okay.
Type of deal.
We can put that together.
Okay, that sounds good. And we'll have this on the agenda for final motion, adjusting the 2018 landscape plan with the agreement between Sister Cities and City of Rehoboth, and we can put this to bed.
So I'll get this to you before the meeting, like within the next couple of days.
Perfect.
Okay.
That'd be wonderful.
So if we're gonna cut the price, what do we want to tell them? More sparse plantings? Because I'll need direction when I go back to them, and it's not clear to me. Just saying cut price doesn't really do much. You
Personally,
gotta give
I would
something.
think the price should be prepare the site for the installation of the fountain. And, you know, the plantings or what have you, a separate bid, if you will.
You want me to pull out how much it is to have a third cost estimate on how much it is just to remove what's there?
Well,
Okay.
I think that's what we need to
Okay.
have to.
Okay.
All right. Now,
Instead of me ballparking 3,500. Okay.
yes. Okay, that's more clear. Now I'm even better. Okay.
Okay. And then I can get a cost, the two things we didn't consider, the cover and the timer. And I'll check to see if most of their commercial fountains do have timers, because I don't know that answer.
If I can make a comment on the timer, I do run, I have a fountain at my house, and I run 24/7 for, you know, April through November. And the electricity cost is so minimal, it's probably not worth paying money for a timer.
Yeah. Well, I think that was more of a nuisance thing. So even if we don't install it, at least know that we can put one in easily for whatever the electrician cost and $25 for a timer. I'll have it looked into. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for coming. We appreciate that. We'll move on to the next item of
Mayor,
business.
if I could.
Yes, sir.
One thing. Again, I certainly appreciate the beautification of the city and all these projects, but the city has no policy or procedure of accepting any type of gifts or from benches to docks to whatever. So I had prepared several years ago a policy to address that, and I would like to see that back on the agenda at some point in the near future, so that we don't come to this frustrating aspects again, both for the donation, the individuals or the organization that donates to us, and ours trying to facilitate making this happen. I think if we've got a $10,000 fountain that is donated to us, now we're at a point where we're kind of going to put it in there without the proper frame around it to enhance the beauty and to enhance the experience of our visitors and our residents. It's a very frustrating situation, and I would like to be able to prevent this from happening again in the future.
Send me over your thing. I think
Be
I
happy
had
to.
it from 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Very good. With that, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is commissioner announcements and comments. Anybody have anything?
The only curiosity I have is on this backflow issue that we have coming up. Do we think we need a little more education on that? I had a difficult conversation with a constituent with a plumbing company standing there who was telling the property owner that everything I was talking about backflow, their company doesn't do that. They push back against that. They don't think it's a good idea. I mean, it just became the most difficult conversation. And I felt like I could not explain the most simplistic part of why would there ever be a backup into a property owner's home. So maybe everybody else knows all this stuff and I'm just the one who doesn't. Somebody say something.
I do not.
Thank you, Don.
Wasn't there a mandate by
is. It's a-
law that we
yes.
had to have to do it?
But that's not the answer people are looking for. The answer is, yes, we have
Re-explain
to
it on
do
a
this,
layperson's
but
level.
why are we doing it? And what makes a backflow even necessary? I honestly felt really out of my wheelhouse trying to explain it,
Right.
especially with a plumber standing there going, and it's a company that we use all over town, saying, we don't do that. We don't do that process. We don't care what you're going to tell us. We're not going to do it. Lynn?
Certainly don't know the answers to your questions, but I am
Neither
working
do
with
I.
Kevin Williams we're first working to put a website that his consultant has put together to get that live on our website. And once we do that, we will put out information in lines in the sand. So there are some education issues we're working on.
In the meantime, is there anything you can give us?
I don't have, Kevin handed
Yes,
out
we
a
can-
handout. He
We
had
did
a
have some
printed.
handouts, but we can have some, we can send that back out to everybody again.
That'd be
That's-
great,
that's
thank you.
Easy, yeah.
All right, Commissioner? All right, thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner comments? With that,
No.
not
under
yet.
this subject.
Not
under
yet.
this subject.
Review future meeting dates. Today at
Mayor,
2.
under this subject, please.
On this subject?
Yes.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. All due respect, ma'am, the backflow preventer is to stop the water from going back into the public water system. It's got nothing to do with your home. It's to stop a problem with your sprinkler system or your pool backflowing and putting water out into the public water system. It's not got anything to do with your backflowing into your individual property. The water comes through a check valve and only goes one way and will not go back out the other. Correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
That needed to be straightened out early because that was flat out wrong. Okay, no
Thank you.
disrespect, ma'am.
Well, but the apparatus, am I wrong completely? The apparatus that we expect a property owner to put on their property is going to be the responsibility of the property owner.
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay.
And it's state law, okay, and I'll address the chair. And then where it's required and where it's installed, then it also has to be inspected once a year. Not everybody needs it, except for the fact that the law requires it, and it's a state law.
And if we have that Q&A somewhere, that would be good.
Thank you. Review future meeting dates. Today at 2 o'clock, there's a special meeting that may include an executive session. And also Friday, October 20th is our regular Board of Commissioners meeting, 2 o'clock. With that, citizen comment, go ahead, Walter. Just identify yourself again, please.
Thank you, Walter Brittingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. I don't mean to be miserable, but again, we have donations coming in, and Commissioner Gossett, I remember when you brought the item up beforehand and we were talking about more memorials down at the boardwalk, and the discussion was appropriate then, and it's very appropriate now because it should have gone by a committee. And I don't remember hearing anything about this fountain. Excuse me, I don't expect an answer, I'm not entitled. But all of a sudden this has popped up. I would remind you that probably the next step on this fountain deal will be television cameras down there to watch because somebody will try to vandalize it. And my last item is, I'm sorry she's not here. I have been fighting since June for a tree at Shaw Park, silver something, and I went to Matt. I thought he was her supervisor, Liz's supervisor, but I've had a flat-out refusal to get a tree trimmed that's extending 1.5 feet over the roadway down at Shaw Park, the Grove, whatever you want to call it. So when you come around from the museum and it grows over the roadway, and at the very same time, not being sarcastic when we have no police enforcement, but you have a police car sitting at way back by the canal. I understand they get paid overtime, come in special to do that. You don't have a policeman out there, and bicycles go in that road from Columbia Avenue, and you have the farmer's market. I don't understand why we cannot get a tree, a city tree, trimmed back and make it safe so that people walking and riding on that roadway don't have to fear a lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. With that, any other citizen comment? If not, then we will adjourn this meeting at 12:53 p.m. Thank you very much.